Hello. Oh, 1 second, sorry. Your beard is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I didn't realize I was muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was dealing with my technology issues over here, so.
I'll just mute till we're ready to start.
Sounds good. Hello.
Gina, how are you? It's good to see you.
You too. You too.
Sorry I missed you on Friday, but I kind of figured that would be the case.
Yeah, I was at my house, and then all of a sudden it was that time for the dog walk, and I didn't have phone with me either because it was, battery low. Oh. Sorry, dealing with the live stream being up at the same time.
Well, I missed most of the white bear contingency because I figured, well, I'll do them and then I'll be close to home. Well, I had one other person to go to in North St. Paul, but I pretty much missed everybody in White Bear Lake.
Really?
Sorry. Yeah, pretty much all. I just missed them. It was getting a little later in the day too. I think that was the other part of it. So.
Yeah, it was just one of those funny things where I came back and I noticed that there was a voicemail. I was like, oh, I didn't bring my phone there. So sorry. Thank you.
No, that's all right. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I just missed Mark. Him and his son just went down to skate on the lake. So
yeah, that's
that'll be a good little surprise for you and get back. You can warm up a little bit with it. So
yeah, I went around a third of the lake the other day on Saturday.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, skating. Yeah, it was really fun. It doesn't happen very often where you can just keep going,
Oh, yeah.
So it was very cool.
Yeah, that is something, is the weirdest thing being in Minnesota. Don't put me on ice skates because I don't do well.
Never too late to learn.
Yeah, this old guy, I don't know. I don't need to be bouncing off the ice. I'll just put my ice cleats on and go ice fishing.
That's true. That is true. Hi, Annie.
Hello. Hi, Rob. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Oh, Annie, you are wearing that hat. Good for you.
Yes, I am. It is time to dream about normal stuff in 2021. And Justin and I are big Disney nerds. So we want to be back with the mouse. How's everyone today?
We're-
I'm ready for a break.
Oh, yeah,
We all
Yeah.
are.
100% for sure. I just turned on my email notification that I'm not going to be on Johnny on the spot anymore with my winter break.
Well, I'll find out tomorrow when I send you that email, Annie. Just remember, don't reply to it.
That's true. No, I won't be. Trust me. I'm just going to chill out. And we've got Liz knows how to get on and all that good stuff, John. I'm figuring. I know.
So I
Gina's-
think Gina sent her the link and everything.
yeah.
Yeah, I hope
Yeah, I
so.
appreciate Dan taking this on.
Yeah, let me give her a call real quick and we'll see.
Hey, a 98-page board packet. Is that not the best ever? Like,
It
I
hasn't
know. I kept
been-
like got to the bottom and I was like, oh wait.
I haven't seen it that thin in so long.
oh, that's a relief. Yes.
I love your festive gear.
Yeah, I'm like, phew. We're all like giddy up and go now. We got quorum plus. Excellent. In case I was like this strange time, the Monday of winter break.
Liz said she'll be joining us short. Oh, there she is. As I say that, there she is. Woo, she's really quick.
I was just in a holding pattern. Didn't want to arrive too early.
That was smart. Excellent. Well, you know that I've now gone from a Southern Californian to a true Minnesotan when I want snow. My family out there is like, I said, I'm serious. We have no snow. This is terrible.
I understand some may be headed our way, even though it may be just a small amount, but
Yes, I hope so.
You
Yes.
can always go north. There's snow up north.
Yes. Well, that consists of traveling. That's not my favorite thing to do these days.
Here, I'll give you something to enjoy.
oh,
There-
look at that. Wow.
Okay, that's good. I'll take it. I will.
That's a beautiful backdrop. Wow.
That's your actual cabin, right, John?
Yeah, that's a picture right out of the kitchen window.
Dang it. Mm.
Although
That is
some of
one-
those trees don't exist anymore. We had to cut some down.
Diseased or?
We cleared out 55 of them because my son-in-law wanted to bring in a couple of fifth wheels so they could bring friends up and stuff. And yes, there's a lot of beetles in them.
Oh, sure.
So they had to go eventually anyway. There's
Yeah, that's for sure.
sad
All
to see,
right,
but
well,
there's still
Chef-
about a couple hundred left. So.
We're going to go ahead and get this party started here. So 5 o'clock, we are in the workshop, live streaming to everybody out there. Thank you for showing up. And I'm going to actually hand it over to our wonderful vice chair, who, thank you, Dan, has graciously willing to run the workshop for me today. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. So can you hear me all? Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. So tonight, John was, gracious enough to invite Liz. And Liz, you and I have had a chance to meet before because we actually did in person, if you can remember all the way back to then when we used to go. go way back when we could go into the same building together. But since then, we've had a number of folks join on our board. And we just had a discussion last month about how we really haven't had a chance to, and I don't know, honestly, if you've had a chance to sit in and listen to any of our board updates, but because of the way it's set up now, it's kind of so one way, right? I mean, we talk together, but we don't get to see the interaction where normally I know you've had a chance in the past to sit, at the board meetings and we could interact that way, but now it's not the same. So I think today we just really wanted to do more of an introduction. John also passed out the goals. So we have those to kind of reference, for ourselves. And I have a couple of questions, but I thought maybe if you could just do an introduction and,
Sure.
And I don't know if it makes sense for the new board members or, yeah, but go ahead, Liz, why don't you get started?
Just a little bit about my experience. I come from the corporate world and then ended up into education. I have been in the charter school arena for 13 years. I actually started Twin Cities Academy, and we were so successful at that, we expanded to the high school. So, and when I left, I retired. Both schools were recognized by the state because of our high performance. So I've been in the trenches, and I think it has allowed me as an authorizer to be able to really look at the hard work that goes into successful schools. And let me just stop there. I mean, you guys do an amazing job. I look at, again, with great understanding that this does not just happen. It requires the effort and work of everyone. It requires a functional board. It requires people asking tough questions. It requires communication and all those things. So when I look at why we have the charter school law, which is to improve pupil learning, all student achievement, you guys just sort of knock it out of the park. So kudos to that, and continue to do that. A little bit, I think it would be important for you to know in a part of my oversight what I look for. Typically what I do is to attend a board meeting in the fall and also in the spring. If there are schools that have other challenges, I'm at every board meeting because I want to know, and it's important for me to know what's going on. I did sit in on one of your meetings earlier for the new year, and again, it's just a matter of listening and observing. But John will appreciate this. But what I do every month is I review committee minutes, I read board minutes. And if I have a question or if there's something I don't understand, I call John and say, what is this all about? And it's the same thing with the financials. Those documents I review, and I actually have a template that I keep track of so that I can see from month to month issues that have come up, how the money is flowing, if there's huge discrepancies or swings and that type of thing. One of the things that I also looked at that is very important, going back to the charter school law, is whether you were talking about academics. I go to some board meetings and, academics are not discussed at all. And so I have been very meticulous in looking to see whether there has been discussion about student learning and how the school is performing. So every month I'm looking at those particular things. I also do a site visit. And actually, I'll be sending out to John tomorrow. We are going to tweak how we're going to look at site and do them this year in terms of the criteria, certainly looking at the fact that we don't have assessment data and that type thing. So what I decided to do is to pull together a revised site visit report, and I'm going to send it out to John and ask him if there is fairness or concerns, because after all, we've had to revamp and do things differently, but there has to be accountability. So I will be forwarding that to John. I also try to meet with the director and the principals at least quarterly, take them out to dinner. And it's like a networking meeting where we discuss and they get together with other leaders within the portfolio, because it's very lonely out there, and they get to discuss and look at issues and things like that. I always try to have an opportunity where there's a topic that I bring forward to them in terms of recent issues or issues on the radar with the school. I think the other thing I would want to communicate is that it is very important to me to respect school autonomy. I'm not interested in running your school. My job is to provide oversight and to respond to whether students are learning, what is the financial stability and the fiscal responsibility that is occurring, and whether you are in compliance with state statutes and that type of thing. So just a little bit in terms of how I operate.
Very good. I maybe if it's okay, we can just, if we have any questions, because I think that
Oh, sure.
now is a great opportunity that we have for you, Liz. So what's one thing, you know, that we could do better? You know, how many schools do you typically do you help manage with them? And
well, within my portfolio, I had 3 up to 2 years ago. One was closed because students were not learning. So there are schools, one in Minneapolis and you guys. But I also work very closely with Friends of Education. So I help with a lot of their oversight, go into their schools and function in the same capacity that I do with you guys. So if you were to ask me one thing, there's a lot of things that you guys do well. And I think that a part of success is that I don't care how well you do something, can you make it better? My whole thing is, how do we take this school from good to great? And that's my framework. How do we go from good to great? One of the things that did catch my eye that I would ask that the board review is that I noticed that your free and reduced lunch population is increasing. And along with that is then when you look at the federal government, and yet you guys don't provide lunch for those students. So what I would ask is that needs to be monitored as that number goes up. What is the school's position in providing meals that students are entitled to? So that would be something. The other thing that I would ask that you have on your radar, and this is from past experience, is that as you continue to talk about school expansion, one of the things that even with the best of schools this has occurred is that when a school expands, that first year, typically academics take a hit. So I would say that in addition to your planning, that you also have that task force that looks at how are you going to position so that there is not erosion of what you're doing now, and then you got to play catch up again. So that is something to pay attention to. The other thing that I picked up in your board minutes, kudos to you guys. It was like, oh my gosh, this school just rocks. I read where you are contemplating of adding a social studies elective and the one on hidden history. And I just thought, oh my gosh, and looking at when I first came in contact with Math and Science Academy, what the percentage, what your ratios were and where you are now, again, it is what we should be doing in public education. And we should there again be proactive. And more importantly, we're looking at our student demographics. And there again, are we serving all students? So again, I just think that is awesome. I think the fact that you have as a board goal, and I know that it's challenging out there for all schools, but again, you have it on the front burner. We are looking to, again, how do we increase our diversity? Those are the kinds of things that I look for, and I'll pick up the phone and call John and say, hey, kudos, this is wonderful, and etc. But it's also those little things. I think some of what we do, I love to use the analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. You have all these little pieces and they all play a role. But if we don't come together with those pieces, if we have one that's lost or that we have not pursued, we can never complete the puzzle. And I just think you guys do a great job in realizing that we need all of these pieces, and it's important that they come together. Maybe you didn't want a thesis, but I'm sorry.
No, that's good. And you had mentioned in your intro, you have like a dashboard or a template.
Yeah.
Is that versus our goals that we have together?
Yeah, well, it is a tracker. And so one of the things, for instance, I'll give you an example. On the financial tracker, I'll say, what is their budgeted enrollment and what was their enrollment at the date that I reviewed the finances? I will say, what is their expenditures year to date based on the budget and how much they've spent? So if you're at 33% through the year and you've spent 50% in expenditures, I'm going to picking up the phone and say, what's going on? So it's just those key things that I look for in financial. On the other side, I look for whether there are any, so when I look at the other with your board minutes, I look if there's been a closed meeting. If so, I want to pick up the phone and say, was it a personnel issue? What was going on? I want to see if you talked about academics. I want to know if there were any policy changes. That's a huge one. It's amazing that schools do not keep up to date with policies and things like that. So it's those things that I think contribute to school success and high functionality. And so I just want to be able to go back, and then I do like a chart for 6 months, and I can say, whoa, for 6 months, they've discussed student learning. For 6 months, they've discussed policies. So that's the information that I use to help provide insight into your renewal and that type thing, but it's more for me.
Okay. I was just thinking because, you know,
share that with the board, just so that you know how I keep track of that. So I can send a copy of that to John.
yeah, it might be interesting. I'm real big on trying to get our board packets smaller, so I don't want to add more to it. But this one's an important one, and I think it would be nice to know kind of how we're graded or how we're viewed,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
So I think that would be nice to
Would be a contributing factor, sort of, you know, in terms of when you come to charter renewal, how are they doing these other things? But I'd be more than happy to send that.
Yeah, interesting.
That could be a great additional workshop conversation too, you know, which would be nice. But I do have a question on the free and reduced lunch. So, you know, we don't have a cafeteria, Liz. We have no, we don't provide lunch. So I know we have some, when we're in session, we do have alternate ways to help with that. So how would you, when we don't have a cafeteria, how would you suggest helping that? And for sure, when we are not together, how would you suggest?
And, you know, I think you guys are one of in a unique situation because I don't know of really any school out there that has that free and reduced and whatever. I'm going to have to do a little more. And like I said, the number is increasing. And that's why, I mean, it's been on my radar. But, you know, I don't know whether we go to bag lunches or whatever, but the government is saying that if kids are entitled to meals, we've got to do something. So I'll look and maybe some other charter authorizer networks and see how they might be negotiating that and get back to you on that.
That'd be great. Just because we don't have any way of providing.
Right.
You know.
Right. Other questions, clarification?
My name is Rob. I am a new board member. I'm a parent of 3 former MSA students or current MSA students. And my question is, my son, who's now in college, started there probably 12 years ago. And I remember being in a meeting with the board and the director saying, the model is broken. We cannot continue to pay our teachers what they deserve with a growth model. And ever since, the school has had to grow to pay the bills. And it seems to me it's still unreasonable. We're in 4 buildings, but our bank says you need to look to build on your site as opposed to find something, because your costs will be outrageous if you try to build a new building somewhere and then have to try to sell your existing buildings, which are built for a school without a cafeteria, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And so the point is, do you have any ideas? What is a potential sustainable model, and what we can do as not only our charter school, but all charter schools, since we can't share the bonding funds and the like?
Well, I would tell you first foremost that there are many schools that are struggling with that same issue, especially high quality, high performing schools, because your income is finite and access to that income is finite, but your expenditures continue to grow. So the question is, how do you fill that gap? Do you do it through fundraising? Some schools are able to do that. But then there's that reality that, you know, if you're looking at salaries that are comparable to big districts and things like that, I've yet to find a school that can do that unless you have some kind of business partnership, you know, whether it's Amazon or one of those that is willing to kick in the bucks with that. So I think it's something that, which, by the way, I think I will say to you guys, I'm very much aware of, is that your expenditures are extremely lean. And what I mean by that, you have a very healthy fund balance. And again, you've gotten there because you're lean. For instance, I can look at schools right now that come to mind, and I look at how they have less students, they rake in more money, and their expenditures are out of control, and the performance doesn't even come close. So again, it is through your fundraising, I think expansion and those type things, you're going to have to really look and say, what kind of impact will that have on your other schools? Is it then where you're going to have, say, if you were to move to another location, is that going to siphon off some of the profits of your other schools? And I think that I would encourage you guys to really look at some schools that have expanded and gone through this, and what are the lessons learned. But I don't know of any resources out there that you might tap into. The other thing that I found as a school leader used to tick me off is that because you're highly successful, there is an assumption that you don't need money to do the job you do. And so a lot of times you're not included, you know, in those funds. And I would say, so if I'm setting up a science lab in my school and they're setting one up across the way, you're telling me that there's a difference in the cost, the way that I set it up? No, maybe I just do a better job doing my job, but don't penalize me. So I think there's a lot of variables out there. And, you know, the only way, again, that is a contributing factor to sustain and to grow your fund balance and your access to dollars is to continue to monitor. Unless, like I said, I noticed with your fundraising that you guys, I think, have a goal for like 85,000 or something like that. And I think to date you've raised like 30,000. See, I pay attention to this. I look at all these things and pay attention to it. You know, I will also touch base and see if there are other folk out there that might be able to assist us with some of it.
Thank you.
The other thing I found is that I know employees need to pay their bills. And and it's important to be competitive and for people there again to survive and live and to save and to do these things. But there was also something that I learned as a school director, and that is, you know, it's important sometimes to find out what motivates people. And what I mean by that, sometimes it's not always just monetary. There may be other adjustments and things in their lives that they perceive as far more valuable and appreciative and that type of thing. So it's just something to keep in mind, especially when you're looking at finances. Other questions? Perplexed? Clueless? No, I'm just teasing. You know, the other thing that I think really is important in authorizing oversight is also the relationship building and the lines of communication. And there again, to have a level of trust with my school leaders that regardless of whether it's a tough conversation or an easy conversation, that at least we can get through it. And it's not, I gotcha and I'm out to get you type thing, because I'm only as successful as you are successful. And the other thing about how I operate, I don't get uptight about crises and things that happen. It's the world in which we live. Where I put my time and energy is how you respond to it and what you do to correct it. That's where I want you to put your focus and energy.
Can you repeat that? You broke up on, at least on my computer, that last sentence you said.
Oh, I said, I don't freak out over crises and things that happen out of your control. I mean, not unless there's a trend where you've neglected, I've informed you to do something and things have just gotten out of control and exploded, then that's a whole different conversation. But what I'm saying is that when things pop up, it is far more important to me to have you respond to it and put your effort and energy into cleaning it up. Not, well, placing fault, all this other stuff. No, what are we going to do to clean it up and move on? That's far more important.
Liz, you bring up a good point. I mean, so I think it could be the perception that we only reach out if we have a problem, but I think tonight we're reaching out just to kind of get to know each other a little bit better, right? But
Absolutely.
which I think is great. But then also, I mean, at what point would we say, like, you know, we should handle things within the board or within the school, or at what point, without going into specifics, would we reach out to you and say, oh, by the way, we had this issue or that issue? Because I don't want to get to a spot where you say, why didn't you tell me this 6 months ago or something like that, right?
Well,
so
that's
guidance?
why I got you. That's why I read board minutes.
Okay.
See what's being discussed. The other thing is that I believe wholeheartedly in your channel of communication. In other words, I don't believe jumping over A to go to C to go to D. Because if I get a call from a parent, I begin by saying, have you contacted the school? Is there policy within the school that communicates how concerns should be addressed? That's where I start. And then I politely say, this is what you need to do to pursue it. And if you've gone through all the ranks and it ends up with the board and you still haven't gotten any satisfaction, then I would like to know about it. But I'm not going to necessarily override what the school has decided. So it's that point again about showing respect. And it's the same thing with your communication. I hope you have a channel where if it's a student, it goes something like student to teacher, to principal, to school leader, to the board or whatever. If it's a parent, then what does it look like? Has it gone to the school leader? So that's what I look at, again, because it's not my job to do that. But now if we're talking about issues where negligence or non-compliance or some of these issues, then, that's a whole different ballgame. But I wouldn't expect for a board member to be calling me about something for the first time if you've not gone through the proper channels. Unless it's an extreme situation, then that's something certainly I would want to know about. In other words, if it's going to end up in the page of the paper, please call me.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Anyone, any other questions for Liz?
Oh, and the other thing is I've told John and all my leaders, I do not like surprises. I don't like surprises. So I don't want you to interpret how I'm going to react to something. Just give me the information and I will decide.
Liz,
Well,
are you
very good,
the-
Liz.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. Just quick. So this is just a quick one. Are you the authorizer? Are you all of SAM, or are you part of a board and you're just our rep?
I am the director of SAM and I respond to a board. Yes, we have a board. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And we just went through our renewal, just as you go through a charter renewal. SAM just went through its authorizing renewal, and we got a commendable rating by the state. So that's 5 years of data. It was unbelievable. So yeah.
And the state does that one for you guys? You're authorized
Yes,
by the
they
state?
bring in an outside team and they go through, they look for whether you're consistent in how you treat all your schools, how you track data, whether you're in compliance, all of these things. Very intense. Cody, did you have a
Well,
question? Nope. Oh, okay. Got it. Guys, at any time, please, I'd be happy to come and just, have these type sessions and whatever, because again, to me, it's, relationships, communicate. So it's very important.
Yeah, hopefully we can do it in person in the not too distant future, right? So
I hope so.
we can-
I hope so.
yeah, very good. Well, thank you so much for your time
right.
tonight, Liz, and I really appreciate it.
Sure. Happy
I think
holidays,
we're gonna
guys.
switch over.
Continue the good work.
Yeah,
Bye-bye. Toodaloo.
Thank
Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
bye. So next up, we had some extra time, so we had the discussion if it made sense to have some more discussion on policies. So Michelle, I don't know, I know we had 4 different ones listed. Which one do you think, or which ones should we go over to maybe save some time on the board meeting? Do you have a preference on where you'd like to start?
Well, one of the policies that we have is a consent agenda because we don't, so policy 516 had an update for medication disposal, but that we won't discuss because we have to follow the law. So that one's just consent agenda because there's nothing we can do. And then Title IX, we kind of have to make a decision about how we want to pursue it. So we can either discuss that one and it's version 1 or version 2, or the secondary review of 103 and 429. It's the second read of both of those. So, I mean, you could do those 2 or 522. Either one.
And
Preference?
I think, which one do you think has the most discussion in it?
522. Because that's the
Should we
first
start
read,
there?
and we have to make a decision about how we want to pursue it. So
Yeah, and so Michelle, when you say first version or second, the one we have in our packet on
there
page
are 2
71,
in your
that's
packet.
oh,
So 522 should have 2 versions, a 1-page summary, and then the actual full policy. So you should have 2 of them in there.
yeah,
I put
I
version
read
1,
You have
version
the
2 in this
page?
folder.
The
it was
page
page
number,
70.
Michelle?
I thought it was, I read the whole thing.
Yeah, it's 70. It starts on page 70.
Yeah, hang on, let me
Yep.
get down there.
But I thought that was one complete, that was the completed.
Okay, so if you look at 70, the first one is version 2. It's just 1 page, like a very brief summative page. And then the second one is the full version. And so that's where we kind of have to make a decision based on some factors with regard to enforcing sexual harassment and potential changes that might be coming down the pike.
So why don't you just remind everybody why there's that one version and then
Okay.
the other, right? I think that would help everybody.
Yes. So when we were first reviewing this policy, I did the updates to the 22-page policy just to include MSA and change the names and do those kinds of things. But there were requirements that were part of the full policy that we didn't have designated. So we had a couple of policy meetings to kind of figure out where our documentation would be, because there's forms, as they say, that they have to fill out in this policy that we needed to create. And that the admin team created. And then we also have to have a designated Title IX coordinator and an alternate Title IX coordinator. So some of that information we needed. And then when we sent it to the lawyer, I don't know if they were just kind of reading it quickly, but the secondary document we had, we also sent with them a procedure doc that pretty closely mirrors the policy, but it just is a bit reordered. And so they suggested we either go with the policy template or go with the brief one-page version, on the idea that the shift in our administration and the shift in the director of education may shift the policy, that policy might change based on a different individual heading the Federal Department of Education. Myself, and again, this is entirely up to us as a group, to review. I think that it took a long time for this policy update to occur, and they negated a series of earlier decisions to create it. So the likelihood that this policy is going to be rescinded quickly, I think, is pretty slim. I mean, I could be wrong, but just if you think about the wheels of any sort of bureaucratic entity, I think it's going to take time for, even if they want to rescind it, it's still going to take a significant amount of time. And so the abbreviated version is kind of looking at it from their perspective that we have a procedure in place and that it is largely compliant with the exception of a few things, like the Title IX coordinator and a couple of the other procedures. But and it's kind of operating under the idea that then we aren't making too dramatic of a change to how we investigate sexual harassment. So that's kind of what we have to look at. Did you want to go with an abbreviated sort of more general statement under the idea that we may have some changes coming and that perhaps we don't have, wouldn't have to make a significant overhaul yet? Or do we want to go with the procedures that the admin team, and to be fair, they've already got the items in place with the exception, I still don't know who the alternate coordinator is. But the documents are ready, the new form to fill out and those versions, those are all ready. So we just have to decide, do we want to go full out and just be in compliance with the law because we were supposed to have been since August? Or are we going to kind of skirt the middle line?
Well, that's what I thought. We were for sure, like on page 71, 522-1, we were really wanting to put this in place since August 2020 was when we were supposed to have this in place. So I feel like—
yes. The Department of Ed definitely hit schools in a very difficult position. They released it and then backdated it and its effectiveness. So by the time we could look at it, we were already behind. And then they required training in order for people to be listed as investigators. So it's just the requirements weren't able to be completed. And so that was frustrating. So nobody could have it done in August. Like no public universities could, but from like MSBA, like we wouldn't have been able to have that in August because we didn't even have their template yet. But it's up to us to decide for 522. If you look at it, the procedure is pretty well laid out in their template policy about, definitions and what these different things, like what is remediation, what is informal resolution, respondent, and they also go through and define different types of harassment. And they're very clear about what the grievance process is, where equitability falls within the grievance process, and what the actual timelines are. Like, are they the maximum timelines? And generally speaking, hoping to resolve any sexual harassment from beginning to end, including appeal, within 120 days.
Yeah,
so
like
it's
that.
Very specific.
Yes. I did have a question on that page 71 with the alternate title. So we still need this info. So when you say we still need this info, what does that mean? We need the person assigned? Or
Yes,
do we,
yes. By the time I had to submit the policy, that hadn't been determined. So I had to get it for the packet. and I was waiting to hear back. So that we just kind of need the final designation of who that individual is, and then that affects who can be an investigator and who can be a decision maker, so it just affects the rest of the process.
So I noticed there were, and we probably wouldn't want names throughout these. I noticed all the terms and investigator. I know that John's mentioned this coordinator, the original coordinator, and then we wouldn't put names on them, but as a school, we would know who those are, correct? Before we would put that in place, or do we? And I noticed there was a series of training that had to happen for whoever is part of these. So yeah, that was the thing. But so, okay, that's fine. I don't know. I think we should go through this. We're going to be asked to do it. What do you all think?
I guess in my mind, which one's better for students or teachers or whatever. I like the simple, that's just my own personal preference, because then it's like, okay, I can accept that. But the other one, as you mentioned, you go through and everything is kind of like well-defined too. So that seems good too. So I guess in your opinion, Michelle, which one's better for the school? I mean, and by school, I mean the teachers, the students, the staff. Which one is better for us? Because I don't like doing the easy one. The easy one, I think, would be take the one pager, we can all agree and we move on and wait. But maybe that's not the right answer. The right answer is, I don't know.
Okay, well, I can give you two kind of different answers. First up, I disagree with this update entirely. So I have no choice. We have to have this, but the way they define harassment and how narrowly define it means that it's very difficult for somebody to actually successfully complete an investigation. And that most of the times individuals who would try to use this policy to report harassment, it would be non-actionable and would be used under school discipline instead. So you wouldn't really be able to pursue this policy unless it's a very narrow set of circumstances, and they made them more narrow. So what they've done to the policy, I don't agree with at all. But that's not my choice.
That was intentional though?
Yes, it was
like
intentional.
That was done intentionally for some reason, and that is to try to protect the schools, or do you know why they would do that?
Well, that's a nuanced kind of thing, Dan. But generally speaking, it started off with with the good intent of having everything be equitable in investigation. So like, you can't discipline somebody until you finish an investigation. You can't suspend somebody from school because there is a harassment claim made before even investigating it, which was what had happened in a couple of university examples. And so they were trying to refine this process, well, actually with universities first, actually. And so that part of it, trying to make it more equitable, and in the process of it, that equitability narrowed what could be defined as being harmful to a person's daily life and intentional. So their standard of and versus or was changed. And that goes counter to a number of earlier rulings and statute, or it's not a statute, it's a kind of memo that counts as part of a policy that you enforce. They're unclear in their titling. So the intent of equitability, and you'll note in here in this particular policy that equitability is very clearly spelled out. So like, both individuals can see the questions. If you're going to have an investigation, both people see the questions. They can approve the questions. They can make adjustments to it. So how the investigation proceeds is very equitable, which I think is really good. It's just that in its principle, and again, this for the school, we just have to make sure that we are safe and equitable for all students. That's our main agenda and goal. And so when you look at both of them, it's really just that difference in standard, the difference in reporting standard. I don't know, John, what do you think? Is there wiggle room with regard to the difference in reporting standard on this?
Could you repeat your last part of the question? Because Michelle, I was thinking about the reply that Ratwick sent me, but.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was asking if you think with regard to the Title IX, because either way, we still have to comply with it as they intend. Mm-hmm. So we don't do we have any wiggle room with the and or standard anymore?
No, and I guess that was one of the things that Ratwick had pointed out is the and or. Just the changing of that totally changes legally what you can or cannot, may or may not be able to do. And so the first, the one on page 70 is the one that they had sent, because most charter schools have adopted or they're recommending most charter schools look at that one simple page, and actually that Ratwick had sent that to us as this is a alternative to the document, the original document that the policy committee, and when we've spent a lot of time on this, is, you know, the one that starts on page 71. The big part of this is, you know, really the grievance procedure and process. That's the big part of the entire document, is making sure that that is consistent throughout all of your other policies as well, so that you don't have anything conflicting. I would say the one thing that is nice with the 71, and I think Dan, you'd already, I'm going to say page 71, you had already kind of mentioned it, is it is well laid out and it pretty much walks you step by step. Even though it's a long document, you can follow the process. If you go with the one-page document on page 70, then you'll still have to refer to the grievance procedure, because we still have to have a grievance procedure, which is basically what's in the document that starts on page 71.
Yeah.
It's kind of a different way of looking at it. When I was talking with Ratwick, the reason they're recommending a lot of schools going to the short version and then having a grievance procedure and process is because the grievance procedure and process can be quickly amended or corrected if there's new guidance coming out, because it's not an official policy. So it's a little more flexible and easier to adapt to if they change a timeline, or, you know, as you go through, hopefully we never do, but if we have to go through a process and we find out, you know, timing wise, what we have in the document isn't really what we need, we can adjust that process if it's not part of a policy. If it's part of a policy, then we have to go back through and, you know, go through the process of having a policy amended. So they were looking at it for the school's flexibility and ability to be a little more nimble, let's say, for changing procedures. That was the reason they're recommending most charter schools go to a one-page 522 policy with a corresponding grievance procedure.
Yeah, and this was where, when I was looking at it, I was thinking about our red lines and things like that. Changes in procedure aren't super difficult, like in terms of changing, and we can amend policies. I think the one reason that I was leaning towards the longer one is because it also does include a procedure.
Yeah.
So that if somebody needed to know, how do I go about doing this, it's very clearly delineated from beginning to end.
And in my opinion, we put in the time. We used the experience from Tom and Shannon and their training this summer. And it just seems to me that since we put in the time and the effort, unless there is a legal reason not to use it, like we've cornered ourselves and the lawyers say, well, wait a minute, have you thought about this scenario? You're telling us two different things, right? That we'd have to address. But since we've got it, let's use it. And it's not that hard for you know, as long as we continue to have policy wonks like Michelle and others to watch that stuff, to say, hey, board, we need to make a tweak here and there. So that's my opinion.
The other thing I guess that I would add to that, kind of piggybacks with what Rob said, is a lot of times we have to provide for, especially when we do our bond review every year, we do have to provide a document for them that has our grievance procedure in it. So it's real easy to say, well, it's in policy 522 on our website, versus, okay, here is our, you know, and then send them the updated grievance policy or procedure that we have at the school level. The nice thing about having it in a procedure is everybody can see it and can find it, especially if it's in the title of the procedure, which this is.
Is the grievance, you may mention the grievance process may be used in other places. Is that correct? Or, so I mean, will we reference this document then, or, because this one's a specific one, I understand, and is, if I understand Michelle correctly, we've even tightened the definition perhaps But if you have a grievance process, because that would be the only thing I can see why it might be nice, right? Is to have a separate procedure that we could modify and then just always reference in our varying. So what other ones besides this one would a grievance process, would it be different than this process?
I'm not going to answer your question, Dan, I guess, but I will share the concern that Ratwick had was if you have a grievance procedure, you have it in one place. You either have it in policy 522, or you have a separate grievance procedure that everything else refers to. You don't want to have two, because then they have to be spelled out exactly the same, or else now you've introduced some confusion, which a lawyer is going to take advantage of. So we only want to have one grievance procedure.
So what if the process somebody's going under an investigation isn't sexual harassment, and then you have a grievance situation? Like how does that work to cross-reference a policy that isn't what the actual original investigation was about? That grievance process, I don't understand.
So you would just reference the grievance procedure and process as defined in policy 522.
Okay, policy 522, 3, Roman numeral 3, page whatever. All right.
Yep.
So you can do that kind of thing. All right, that's what I'm
Yep.
curious about. All right.
Yeah, and that part of this too is that there are specific things that are not allowed to be where you can't pursue them. So there are certain mandatory dismissals for somebody filing a complaint under 522, but they're very clear that a mandatory dismissal, so it must be dismissed if it wouldn't constitute sexual harassment if found to be true, if it didn't occur in the school's program, if it didn't occur in the United States. So there's specific things that are mandatory dismissal, and there's others that are possible dismissal. Now that doesn't mean the person can't be subject to school discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very clear about that they can still be subject to school discipline. They just cannot be subject to specific disciplinary measures as delineated by this specific policy. But then it would revert then to our school discipline practices and procedures, which we do include international behavior and incidents in.
Yeah, for field trip. When I read that, I'm like, well, we do have field trip things.
Oh yes, and that policy is valid on all kinds.
No, so that would be covered under here in case something happened out of the country, for example, but we have it in field trip.
And it wouldn't,
policy.
they couldn't file under Title IX, but they could and would be applicable under harassment and school discipline. I'm forgetting the policy numbers, but
yeah,
they
that's
would be
what I was
applicable under
wondering.
that. Yeah.
Question.
All right.
What would happen to our policy 103? Would complaints be different than grievances?
103, hang on, I've got it right in front of me because I printed them out. So this one is for complaints, and you could amend this to reference 522, but 522 also references the Title IX coordinator as our director, so that's a bit of a redundancy. So our main coordinator is the director, and then in 103 says that complaints can be made to and the director will kind of make the designation of where to direct or where to send that investigatory or that complaint. And then it would go to the appropriate person. And in this case, then if it was the director and somebody was using 103 to sort of report other complaints, it would still be him who would be directing it to the correct body to review and investigate. So I think you would still be fine.
Gotcha.
And then under the same policy, because this one is,
So I'm hearing a kind of a movement towards using the longer policy. Is that, I guess, is anyone in favor of, any reason why we should use the shorter one?
honestly, if we had the shorter one in August, I'd say go with it. But we have more information now, and we actually have a process that we put into place. Sorry, Amy.
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
So if we use the long one and we that lays out a grievance policy. Do we have to update other policies to match it?
We can.
Well, it sounds like we have to, because if the grievance policies aren't aren't the same in places, it creates confusion, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know, actually. I don't know whether it creates confusion. This one specifically has as its title, non-discrimination policy, grievance procedure and process. But I did recommend that's the title of the full title of 522. That's what it is.
So it spells out it's a separate process for a separate thing.
Yeah, so it defines sexual harassment and then it includes a formal grievance procedure.
And the formal grievance is it is part of objective and unbiased evaluation of complaints, but the actual process is a basic requirement I don't know. I know this gets messy.
It definitely does. And we can go through, like, as we update other policy, as we have annual policy updates, to include the reference to policy 522 as we go. Just redline it in. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. And we do not have a formal grievance process right now. Is that what I'm hearing? In general. Do we have a process for grievances in other areas other than this? We do not have one right now at MSA?
No, we do. I want to say it's embedded in a policy. I have to just give me a minute.
I think it's still embedded in the previous sexual harassment policy.
Right. I say it's still embedded in the old one.
Yeah.
And then I did have one just follow-up question on this. Do we have separate policies for religious discrimination, racial discrimination? Those are all separate things?
Yes, they have protected class under the harassment policy. Harassment and violence 413.
Okay, so it's a different one. All right, because just in some schools, they're together in one large policy with their grievance thing. So I was just curious.
Yeah, definitely.
Do we have a grievance procedure then and there and they may be different? Have we looked at that?
For that one, the reporting procedure, so we still, the reporting procedure before listed what they called a human rights officer, and it was still John. And then they had Form 413 that can fill out for bullying, for those other things that they can fill that out because it's specific to protected classes. So when a report comes to John for either or, he would be the person to designate it as part of special classes harassment, or have them fill out the 522 sexual harassment, like whichever of the initial reporting forms would work best.
Thank you.
The only thing we have to do, we have to double check, and I haven't even had a chance to, is I'm pretty sure then the next thing that we would need to do would be to take our existing 413 and remove the sexual harassment elements from it so that it becomes not a conflicting policy.
Right, that was my concern.
And just real quick, I'm learning legal speak a little better as I go through this. And or, that whole and or, I'm not clear on what that even means. What do you mean and or now? Why is that such a big deal?
Previously, I want to make sure I get the exact 3 words. Hang on 1 second. So when we look at the and or standards, so they define sexual harassment and they define quid pro quo, hostile and violent acts crimes. So previously you had old definition of some things, like the older definition included unwelcome conduct and as determined by a reasonable person to be severe, pervasive, or persistent, and to interfere with or limit the student's ability to participate in or benefit from school services. And it was changed to be severe, pervasive, and so objectively offensive that it effectively denies the person's equal access. So the definition of what constitutes harassment is more narrow.
All right, thank you.
Can you
Well,
repeat
we've
that
got-
one more time?
Hang on. So previously, the definition of, because a hostile environment is included within it, previously it was unwelcome conduct determined by a reasonable person to be severe, pervasive, or persistent, and to interfere with or limit a student's ability to participate in or benefit from school services, activities, or opportunities. That was old definition. So it could be pervasive or, one of the three, and then also interfere with or limit their ability. The new definition is still includes unwelcome conduct determined by a reasonable person, so those didn't change, but then it's to be severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive, so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive, that it effectively denies a person's equal access to the recipient's education program or activity. So you need to meet all three.
All three, yeah.
And instead of interfering with, you need to prove effective denial, that really you couldn't participate to the degree of other students as a result, a direct and tangible result that you can document. But that's the new definition that exists. We can't contest that. That's the federal definition, so we don't have a role there.
And I think that's part of the reason why our legal counsel is of the mindset that with the change in the administration, this will eventually get switched or changed, but it's not, it's not on the top 100 things to do. I think, years 2, 3, somewhere in there, that's where this is probably going to be addressed.
And it will likely be addressed with universities prior to K-12.
Yep. Yep.
And that was the other thing that, go ahead, Annie.
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just going to say, that's the other thing when you were saying, I doubt they're going to take a look at this. I mean, we're not out of COVID. We're not out of, all of those things. They're not going to take, the new administration is not going to look at this at all. And so I firmly believe that we don't have to worry about things changing on us January 1.
And I was going to say, are we in that one page? Are we actually in compliance of the new Title IX regulations with the one page? Is it an actual compliant document? If it is, I mean,
what they said.
I mean, I don't get it. Like, why would, if we're in compliance, what are we doing? A 17? How many pages is this thing? I didn't know that. For some reason, my brain didn't get that separation, but
well, the thing is, the page one says that there is a grievance procedure that accompanies the policy. So we would still have to publish our grievance procedure in accordance.
Right, but
So
then that could be a
plus that.
procedure, right? And then we're not, it's a procedure rather than, I don't know. I feel like,
But if you look at the procedure, it's almost identical to the policy. No, it's not cleaner.
Well, and I hear.
But we can do a procedure instead.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering because like we have all these other places where people can complain or grieve, right? It doesn't matter to me where it is. I think the question is where's the easiest for people to find it, or who's the one that's going to be using it when they go through? Are they able to find it, right? Because in my mind, I think it was brought up earlier. I may not think, sexual harassment. I got to go find the grievance policy in there. It's just.
And that is also
I like
why
that we have it.
Part of the policy indicates a requirement that we would have to do no matter what, is that we have to publicize not only our Title IX information, but our process. I recommended a flow chart. Just like first, second, third, it was my recommend. I feel like that's going to work best. Mr. Johnston said he would be working on it, just in case.
The nice thing about this, Dan, is we do have the grievance procedure in the name of the policy, 522. So at least it's called out. So if I'm an external body looking at where do I go to find a grievance procedure and I'm going through all of our policies, they can identify it. Right now, as it is, it's embedded in another policy, but we've never identified it in the title. So unless you go through and read through all the policies, you'll never find our grievance procedure, even though we do have it, because we've never put it in the title, whereas we actually have it called out here, so it is visible.
Well, one idea I like about having a separate procedure is there may be situations where it falls that there's partial sexual and there's partial religious or partial, other protected classes. So if they're the same grievance procedure, there's still one track to follow. Does that make sense?
Well, I'll tell you what, it is 6:01. Why don't we, at least we've had a really good conversation on this. We'll bring it back into the meeting and we'll take a 15-minute break and come back. And then maybe hopefully some consensus could be at least where we head from here. Does that sound great? All right, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break then. All right, we're getting about 6:15. Everyone's coming back. Our nice little on time board of directors. I love it. All right, I'm going to go ahead at 6:15 and call our meeting to order. I will please ask Paula if you would read the mission and vision, please.
Our mission, we provide accelerated curricula in all subjects with an emphasis on math and science, vision to be an innovative, sustainable model of academic excellence that creates well-rounded lifelong learners and global citizens.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paula. Thank you for being here on winter break too. I love it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and roll call all of us by taking attendance. Dan Ellingston.
Here.
Cody Schneip.
Here.
Michelle Krakowski.
Here.
Gina Albers.
Here.
Adam Bartz.
Here.
Robert Kruger.
Here.
Jennifer Bartle.
Here.
Maggie Burgraff.
Here.
Paula Acapo.
Here.
John Garecki.
Here.
And Jenny Abbs is not here, so that one's on. And Annie Cardenas here. So we are all here board-wise. Appreciate that. All right, so we will move, if someone would like to move to approve the agenda, item number 3.
I can move. This is Dan.
Oh.
Okay, Dan first. Do I have a second?
This is Adam. I will second.
Adam will second. Thank you, Adam. Any discussion on the agenda? All right, then I will do a roll call vote on approval of the agenda. Dan Ellingston.
Yes.
Cody Schneid.
Yes.
Michelle Krakowski.
Yes.
Gina Albers.
Yes.
Adam Barth.
Yes.
Rob Kruger.
Yes.
Jennifer Bartle.
Yes.
Maggie Burgraff.
Yes.
Annie Cardenas, yes. That is all in favor. Motion carries. All right. Open forum. I had one open forum letter to read tonight. So I'll get that out real quick. Good afternoon. I assume this is a common question, but it is an unlikely event it is not. We are interested in knowing the plan for resumption of in-person classes, hybrid or full in-person. While realizing the pandemic nor vaccine rollout are predictable, the governor, state legislatures, and education groups are all indicating that teachers will likely be considered essential workers for COVID-19 vaccination. Also, given the potential drop in both virus spread and teacher vaccinations by March, it seems highly plausible that at least a hybrid option could safely occur in late March. I am sure all parents look forward to hearing what the board is planning and need this information sooner rather than later. If for some unfathomable reason the BOD, the board of directors, is planning no return to any face-to-face instruction anytime in January through June 2021, then parents should be informed of that now so that we can consider alternatives. For example, choosing to transfer, etc. Ideally would need to be done at the end of this semester. Thank you. Christopher Tartarka. And I will definitely hand that over to Mr. Gorecki and also the COVID liaison team that are developing this plan. So thank you so much. You should be hearing from them. And that is our only open forum letter tonight. All right. So continuing on to item 5, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for November 16th, 2020?
This is Adam. So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second. This is Gina.
Albers. Okay, thank you. Gina Albers is second. Any discussion on those minutes? Okay. All right, I will roll call. Oh,
I do
yes.
have one question on page 6, the last paragraph under Roman numeral 6, which is BI number 2. It says as a BOF. Is that supposed to be BOD?
Yes, we discussed that today.
I think it might just be a misprint.
Yes, I can change the very first one.
Thank you. Yes, very good. Thank you, John. All right.
I have another one.
Yes.
On page 8. Let me find it. Page 8, number 7. It says at the very end of that, for MSA started distance learning today. Is that correct?
That's page 8, Maggie.
Page 8, number 7, director's report, in that first paragraph. And then the last sentence is MSA started distance learning. It should be 8:33 started distance learning today. And then I noticed one more thing on page 14. I have to find it again.
Just one second.
On page.
So John,
sure.
Is that supposed to say 833 or is it supposed to say MSA started distance learning August 30th?
No, it should be ISD 833.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Maggie, what was your other one?
On page 14, in the very first line at the top, the A in MSA is lowercase.
Oh.
Sorry.
Good for you, Maggie. I saw that too. I'm like, meh. Science teacher, meh. English teacher, boom, bump it up to proper English. I like it. All right. All right. Any other discussions on those? Thank you for pointing those out. I would like to go ahead and motion. Did we have a motion on the floor already to approve the minutes on 5? Yes. And who was that again? Just refresh for Isla and for me.
It was myself, and then second
Gina.
by Gina.
Okay. First by Adam, second by Gina. All right. If there's no other discussion, I'll go ahead and roll call the vote. Dan Ellingston,
Yes.
Cody Schneid,
Yes.
Michelle Krakowski,
Yes.
Gina Albers,
Yes.
Adam Barth,
Yes.
Rob Kruger,
Yes.
Jennifer Bartle,
Yes.
Maggie Burgraff,
Yes.
Annie Cardenas, yes. That's all approved. Motion carries. All right. Chair's report. I am graciously allowed Mr. Ellingston, our vice chair, to run workshop. It was really great. We had our authorizer in from, well, I don't know. We had our authorizer in. She helped Liz, and I can't remember her last name. Someone help me out. Why am I blanking?
Liz Wine.
Thank you. Sam is our authorizer for MSA, and she was really gracious to come and just introduce herself and some of the key points of what she looks for in all board meetings. And we were provided also beforehand our goals for our school, which are great and enlightening. There's 3 of us that are new on the board. So it was really great. And then we talked the last half about one of our bigger policies that's on the floor right now that we'll be calling back during our meeting. So the last half was spent doing that. And And I'd also just, as in general, we'll be hearing this a couple times, I'd like to invite everybody for January for our Board of Directors Strategic Plan Retreat on 1/11 at 6 p.m. This will be live streamed, so you're welcome to come in and be a part of that. Really excited. It's I'll get a little more into that as we get down to that part. And then I'll hand it over to John with his director's report.
Just a couple of things that I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of, for those mostly that are listening, not necessarily to you board members. One of that is under the student achievement part is we had 262 applicants for AP courses, which is up from last year. So our students are seeking out the more challenging courses. That's not to say that all of the students will get into those particular classes, but that's how many have requested to be in the classes. So that's fantastic news. The other part of that is we went live with our enrollment for next year, and on the first day we had 124 applicants. So a strong showing again, and I'm sure that number will just continue to grow, and we will hold our lottery in February. So you can look forward to, I guess if you're one of those applicants, you can look forward to that date. I believe it's February 9th when we will be doing the lottery, and that's when the winners will be announced. I do have a couple of updates on page 18 for the COVID evaluation, so just so you're aware of it. Just a reminder, the state guideline for distance learning is a COVID rate of 30 or more. Our current rate, Washington counties, I should say current rate for today is at 80.1. We're on the downward trend, but we're still way above the distance learning cutoff that state had originally recommended. The other thing that you should be aware of that just came out from today's MD commissioner call was they're looking for, MDH was actually on the call, and the person that they had talking from MDH gave some information out that they're anticipating another kind of wave of COVID coming through in January and February. They basically, their words were, we're looking for a bleak January and February. So just our numbers are down, they're trending in the right direction, but that was the first time I had heard that the state is anticipating another wave coming through sometime in January, February. And I just wanted to make everybody kind of aware of that information. I'm sure we'll hear more as time goes on, but that's it for information that I can provide at this time, unless you have questions.
John, I had one question without going into specifics, and it was in the academics one, but I noticed 3 middle school students are transferred out. Can you say in general, is there a trend there, or was there specific reasons? What was that?
There were, well, no, there's not any trends. I believe, if I remember right, one of those was a family of 2, and they were leaving because they were moving, and some of them, and another one was because they were moving out because they wanted to go to a school that wasn't in distance learning. Well, obviously, we're all in distance learning now, so they transferred to another school that was in hybrid, and then they went to distance learning anyway. To that end, we've replaced 2 of the 3 vacancies that we have in middle school. So we still have one more, which Ms. Punsack is working to fill. So it's a matter of when we'll get that filled. But we have a long waiting list, so it's just a matter of who it will be.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more questions? John, did you have anything else to contribute to that?
No, that's it for now.
Yeah, I did notice, by the way, that the Friday wins. So I was kind of unclear on page 18 when we're talking about average total absences for days of the week. were you trying to make the point that we're actually now going down on our attendance? What used to be a Friday high absentee day is now down on that day?
Yes, that is correct. Friday, before our Win Fridays, Friday was the highest non-attended day, or the day with the most absences by far. It was almost twice as much as the next closest school day. And since we've instituted the Win Fridays, you can see, Fridays are the day that most students are reporting for attendance. So we've curbed that trend. Along those lines, parents and students can look forward to a survey in January talking about the effectiveness of Win Friday and their satisfaction rate with that, along with other aspects of the distance learning plan. And things looking forward to second semester.
And that survey, I saw that you were going to deliver a survey in January for that purpose, correct?
Right. And that's mostly informational gathering as well for the board. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
John, just looking at these numbers, 40 plus students on an average day still seems kind of high. Is the administration looking at other avenues to try and get students not to be absent, getting them more engaged?
Yes, there's other aspects that we are looking at. This is, that is a high number when you look at 45 students, but in context, if you look at attendance rate, it's still over 90%. We're over 90% attendance rate, which is where we have historically been right around 90 or 90%. So in context to a regular in-person school year, we're about where we would have been this same time last year. But that's not to say we're still looking at ways how can we minimize that. But to that end, whenever there's an absence of a student that's more than 2 days, there is some kind of follow-up with the family to make sure, just to find out what is the reason for the absence. Is it an illness? Is it a conductivity issue? Just so we're not missing anything or any student, they're not missing a class because of a technology issue.
And that was my question, John. Is this for a full day's absence, or is it like maybe they missed second hour, but they were there the rest of the day? Just a full day?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So they could have. Yeah, they could have been. But no, this is if they missed first hour and they were there for the rest of the day, this counts them as one person. So it may be 45 students, but that's not 45 students that may have missed the entire day. They may have missed 1 hour and been there for the other 3 hours.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd be shocked if it was high. I have the best attendance I've ever had in the 8 years I've worked there.
Yeah. Overall, if you look by hour across the board, our attendance this year is actually at or higher than it was last year.
Okay, so this is maybe skewed a little bit high because of that. Okay, that alleviates some of my concern. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a student gone for the entire day.
I mean,
some of them are, but not all.
Yeah, it's good to have outsiders ask these questions.
Yes. Yep. Good point of clarification, though.
Is there anything else on here that anyone would like to discuss? I don't have Cody here. Look at Cody. I was on mute. You usually would snap me right up if you were there. Paula, would you like to give a student update?
Yes. So currently the Student Advisory Council, we've been working on Heritage Months, and we sent out a survey last advisory, and we're planning on getting more in depth in January and for Black History Month and Women's History Month. And outside of that, we've been working on obviously our focus groups. So that's sex ed, inclusive curriculum, and mental health. So we will be probably contacting teachers in January, mid-January, and that's where we're at so far.
Great job, Paula. I noticed just a real presence of student council and just students this year. I think because of this thing called distant learning and our need for each other. So I really commend all that our student body is doing right now. I feel it's really filling in some of our gaps. All right, so what I would like to do is just go through each board committee. As you know, I asked if people would look over and have questions only, so we can save some time. The notes are so well and so specific that we all felt really taking the time to recap is a waste of our board time. So any questions for academics for Ms. Kurkowski? Okay. And how about annual fund? I actually did have an annual fund question. I guess Adam, that would go to you. Now I noticed, this is my question and I'll open up to anyone else, but I did notice that we did, and I don't blame that this happened, believe me, I've been a fundraiser a long time, that we did woefully go under what we would hoped had happened. And it's obviously we're all in tough times. But then there was a cancellation of the possible soup option for raising. I don't even know how much money that would make. It might be more of a hassle, and then we're like poking people for no reason. But we canceled that option because we said one fundraiser only. Do you feel that we just, no matter what, we just need to keep on that rather than to have maybe another source of revenue to kind of get the $50,000 delta that was missed?
Yes. I think you kind of hit both points. The annual fund committee didn't want to go back on what we had stated and campaigned for up to Give to the Max Day. That Give to the Max Day was going to be the only major fundraiser that we were going to do, and we want to stick to that. There might be some like sly, not backdoor under the table, but like quiet campaigns, like maybe because there's a lot of opportunities where money can trickle in, such as payroll deductions from other employers, things like that. So those will still have money coming in, but they're not going to be as advertised as Give to the Max Day was. That soup campaign was something that we did discuss, but it was decided that it'd be kind of going back on that original campaign idea. It was like, hey, we're only going to do this one thing. But if that's something that is brought up later, then perhaps we can reconsider it, or it could be on the table for next year if that fundraising option is still going to be available.
Thank you so much. All right, any questions for communications committee? No? All right, and how about personnel? We had 2 meetings, if you've noticed. Any for either of those 2 meetings that we had? All right, school expansion possibilities? All right.
I had one question.
Yes.
Dan, I know that it's probably a big document, but is there any chance of us seeing like the larger wish list doc that we were, because I know the teachers had one that they were adding to, but I didn't see maybe some of the students' full wish list. I'm sure there was some repetitions, but is there any chance of the board seeing the larger doc?
Good question. So yes, it's on my list to do, is to summarize that a little more. So in the notes, we got kind of the top line summaries of kind of the buckets, if you will, that we saw. But I have a large document that John helped collect, right? And then we have a Google spreadsheet, which is the teacher feedback. So both of those things need to be kind of combined, and it just a matter of me just doing that. And then I'll probably pass it off to John, and then we'll say this is kind of where we're at. So it actually fits in nicely because we're hoping to have early next year, maybe as early as January, having a couple of the real estate developers or the building companies come. So to be able to kind of flick them a document, which is like, here's our wish list, I think that would go over well. So we're getting close and we're kind of marching towards that, but I don't have a compiled just yet. Coming soon.
That's excellent. Thank you.
I have one more question. Well, thank you. Dan, did you have an opportunity to reflect on what the financial advisor, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but his recommendation, did you have a chance to talk about that or thoughts on that?
We didn't. Yeah, good question. And I think you're talking about like expansion of existing site versus a new site.
Yes, that he
green build, right?
recommended that
Versus,
you're right. You're much better off building on our site than trying to find something and then selling ours.
So we kind of we brought it up, but we didn't deliberate on that topic. I think one nice thing is if we kind of focused on the wishes of what we need the next, right, inconsistent with our vision and mission, where do we want our school to be? Hopefully that'll answer some of those questions too. So it's not an easy answer to your question. I mean, there may be some other things that are influencing what we can do versus what we want to do. But at the same time, knowing where we want to take the school and the things that are really coming through, we try to do one of those word art maps, because the student feedback, right, they had so many different things, but it was kind of fun to see the things that were coming up consistent, like, yeah, some of the cafeterias or hot lunches. We talked about that during the workshop a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
So it's something that we don't offer currently, but a lot of the students are consistently asking for. So we're getting some of those things compiled, and I just need a little bit of time to probably boil that down a little more and have a more concise document. And then it comes back to your question, Rob, is can we get what we want at the current site? Because maybe that's financially the right answer and the easiest one. But if we can't, then we're gonna have to come back and say, okay, then how do we make it happen that we go to a new site, and what does that look like, right? So I don't think it's been decided yet. I know we've talked about it, but there's a lot of things kind of poking from different directions on this one. So coming soon. And I think we'll get a little bit more feedback from the developers when we have those discussions with them as well. So it's kind of piecing the whole puzzle together.
I did like the word art, by the way, for the students, how the bigger words just pop out what they like. Yeah, it was great. All right, any other questions for the school expansion? All right, any questions on policy, although we will be covering those three later on in our old business section, but any questions for Ms. Krakowski? All right, that's been a big job this year. Any questions on the well, let's go ahead and I guess we move into the motion for the financials, and we can have a discussion and then approve. So item 9, I would like to move to approve the financials. Do I have a second?
Cody will second.
Cody will second. All right, is there any discussions, points that people have for financials?
Well, let me give a quick rundown real quick. So we've taken care of our bond financing or refinancing. That's done. This last meeting we did, basically our budget was based off of assumptions of being in person, and we are not in person, so our budget looks completely different. We are going to be revamping that a little bit. They've already done some things. So our budget our budget will be changing a little bit. Now that we have the data, we need to kind of forecast the rest of the year. And then other than that, our finances look pretty good. We have strong cash balance and our cash flows are good. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, mine are dumb ones because I'm getting used to this. So I noticed like on page 53 for the lawn care, which I'm guessing is snow plowing too, or snow things. And also for like the cleaning crew on page 54. I mean, these are very expensive, like Vanguard Clean and $3,500 for that. And I'm just wondering if we're not in person, why, I mean, is that like normally what it would cost for people not being in person, those kind of numbers? Or like, why are they just seem high. When I was looking at the financials, I thought to myself, what is different this year because we're not there? And that's kind of the things I look for, that why are they so high?
So I don't know if you don't mind if I jump in there, Cody. The cleaning is about half of what's contracted. So if we're in person, that cleaning is going to be about double the cost.
That's what I needed to know,
Yep,
if not
yep.
more with all the extra protocol, right?
Right.
I
Yep.
was just wondering
Yep.
if there's, okay. All right, and then just that's kind of what our snow plowing and our landscape, I know you guys did a big trim and all that, but thank you for clarifying that.
Also, for those of you, I'm planning on covering some of this in that training, finance training. We do have a column in our budget. The last column is % of the budget for the year, and then we always put how far we are through the year. So currently we're 42%, and occasionally some things are already higher than that, and those represent like maybe one-time payments, like if we're buying a curriculum or textbooks that's already been expensed. Everything else is pretty like a line 820 is dues and memberships. That's at 97%. Well, those are already paid for the year, so that's not going to go up anymore.
Yeah.
But everything else, there's a lot of 30s in there. So those are the things that are like, they're down because we're not in person.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Or stuff like that. So I
Thank
will
you.
cover that again in some of our training. But because I know numbers without context are hard to interpret. So that's how we give context to interpret them.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Are there any more discussion points on financials? All right. I would like to then roll call vote to approve the financials. Dan Ellingston,
Yes.
Cody Schneid,
Yes.
Michelle Kurkowski,
Yes.
Gina Albers,
Yes.
Adam Bart,
Yes.
Rob Kruger,
Yes.
Jennifer Bartle,
Yes.
Maggie Bergrath,
Yes.
Annie Cardenas, yes. That's all yeses. Motion carries. All right. Now moving into our consent agenda, 10A. Would somebody like to move to approve the consent agenda, 10A?
I will move.
Would somebody
That's
like to
Michelle.
second? Yep, thank you. Would somebody like to second that?
This is Rob. I will second it.
All right. Any discussion items for the student medication policy 516? Okay, I will roll call a vote on this. Dan Ellingston, approval of this?
Yes.
Dan Ellingston? Okay.
Yes.
Cody Schneid?
Yes.
Michelle Kurkowski?
Yes.
Gina Albers?
Yes.
Adam Bartz?
Yes.
Rob Kruger?
Yes.
Jennifer Bartle?
Yes.
Maggie Bergrath?
Yes.
Annie Cardenas? Yes. That's all yeses. Motion carries. All right, so yes, now we hit our 11A, old and unfinished business. So I would like to discuss at this point policy 522, which we did cover some in our workshop. And I think I'll just, maybe, Michelle, is there other things that we need to, that you feel we should guide us on this to move it forward?
No, we just have to decide what we want to do. I mean, both version 1 and version 2 have, have merits. So we can do the shorter version, but then we still need to publish our procedure or have the procedure be part of the existing policy until they change some of the other things like the and/or standard and burden of proof. Those things we don't have any control over. So I don't really. So
Yeah.
kind of what y'all think.
All right, so what do y'all think?
So if we just approve the policy and just attach the procedures just like on the website and there's a change like to a name or something, so that doesn't have to come to the board. The director could make those changes, or
Yeah.
so maybe it would just be easier to just know that they're done, put them on the website, and not involve the board in all the little changes.
And have a grievance process that's a procedure rather than part of Title IX. Yeah.
Conversely, the board is also liable if the standard isn't met, that we were negligible or that we were willfully dismissive, and we are all liable. That's all. Sorry, that's also part of it.
But that and/or, so again, if we had the and/or was also an issue with the lengthier version, which we are also culpable for. So I'm confused.
Two different things, Annie. Two different things. So the and/or we don't have control over. That's federal statute. We don't have control over it. We have to go by that standard. What I'm saying is if there are changes made and the board is unaware of them, then that could create an issue. If it's deemed to be willfully dismissive, then we could be liable. That's my only argument for keeping it as a policy. So then we all have to know what that policy is whenever a change is made, just because it's so very specific and so restrictive. But it's just a thought, just throwing it out there. It is easier to change a procedure too.
How I read the procedure just in general looks like the grievance process makes sense under this Title IX, but would it make sense for folks? I mean, do we need to make any changes for it so that it can be more generic, applicable? Do you know, does that make sense? I mean, like if you're coming at it from a different angle, because we're talking about reusing it, which I like. I don't like having more than one grievance policy. I think we can all agree it should be probably one. Wherever we put it is the question, right? So is it buried or is it separate? But I'm just, I guess, Michelle, to you, would this need some change? I seeing like Title IX this, Title IX that under the grievance process on page 75, it looks like. Do we need to make some tweaks or changes just to make that more generic?
I don't think that we can.
If we leave it in here?
Yeah, and we would, and that's my point too. If we have it as a procedure, it's still a procedure that has to coincide with this policy. We can use it as applicable to others, like you have to report to the director, you have to, you know what I mean? So those things are still applicable. But that's kind of where my trouble came in with it, is that the procedure is still very closely aligned to this specific policy. And in order to enforce this policy, our procedure has to follow. So we have to have the investigator, the alternate, like the procedure still needs to follow this policy regardless. That's kind of where I was like.
But I think, Dan, if I'm not mistaken, you're asking if there are other grievance areas and other policies and we want to refer to part 3 for that grievance policy. Can we, because Title IX is everywhere on this grievance procedure, can we use it for other?
Yeah, I might get confused, right? If I'm saying I don't have a Title IX complaint, I have a complaint about X or Y, but now I'm referred over to this Title IX and it doesn't, you know, it's not tracking with me. So I just don't know like what parts apply and what parts don't. I don't want to make it more complicated at all, but I get your point that for the Title IX grievance, we have to follow a certain procedure and that's spelled out. And I think that makes a lot of sense. That's very clear, 1, 2, 3, this is how you do it. It's just for the, I maybe we're trying to be too concise, but I like the idea of referencing it in our other, referencing something in our other policies, right?
Definitely. Well, and that's the other thing with this. We can also then go forward and reference it in other policies, but change it to be that, you know, that if you're going to report to the school human rights officer and it's the same person, we may have different forms for other types of things. That's one of the problems that they came into with the way they wrote this particular policy, is that you have to follow the process they have established. And this is a grievance process. It's a grievance process that's more specific to sexual harassment, but it can be applicable in terms of go to the director. They will investigate your claim. You have, you know, you file your particular grievance and evidence and evidentiary support. And so that part of the process remains. But when we have other procedures, like for example, if we look at our harassment policy of other, you know, groups based on like religion, race, you know, things like that. So if we look at our other reporting process for specific groups, we can see what our language is there to try to make them wash together. Because I think that's part of the problem, is that even if we separated them, you still have the same language. That's part of the trouble.
And that comment that you made, Michelle, about the board being liable is kind of resonating with me. If we do separate this out, how do we mitigate that risk so that the board is aware of any necessary policy changes or is directing policy changes to, or changes to a procedures so that we are not being willfully neglectable.
And that was also kind of where, and same thing when I was looking at like how the school responds and how a school must respond in this specific policy and examples, it's dictated in their template policy, what we have to do. And so when we're looking at they shifted what they call the deliberate indifference standard. And so instead of the old rule said the school had to take immediate action to eliminate the sexual harassment or violence, prevent its recurrence, and address its effects, and it needed to be immediate. But that's where the trouble came in, is if you're addressing a wrong that hasn't been investigated yet, somebody could be punished before, or have negative consequences for a behavior that they hadn't committed. So that was the concern. And so then changing it, the new rule is a failure to respond, but specifically in light of known circumstances, and then you have known reporter standards. So my only question would just be that our failure to respond reasonably with known circumstances, we have to know what our response has to be, so that then we can comply with whatever it is. So that was my rationale for if they change something there, we have to do it no matter what. So if the federal government was like, yep, your Title IX policy is good, but this provision, Roman numeral 5, letter B has to say this instead. And it has to, like, the procedure says it too, but it would still be one of our red lines. Or at least I would personally like it to be.
The proposal that, a lot of work has been gone into this lengthier version, and I think that seems like that makes sense. So just a proposal, we accept this one, but then we take as the action item, as we go through the other policies, right? We take a look and see what needs to be amended, or does it need to be done instantly, or can we just, as we go through the calendar, update the ones that have grievance policies to make sure that they still make sense? Because we probably can't solve all of those just tonight, right?
No, we can't, especially because prior to, like, we can pass this, but then the other parts of the policy still have to be in effect. So we still have to develop training materials for the staff, because part of this policy, regardless of which version you pass, the staff all become reporters as well. So they have to be trained on the new procedure and process. And then we have to post those training materials as well as our reporting procedure, like graphic about what to do publicly. So they have to be on our site visible. So those things have to happen first. And then we can, I think, start looping in the others.
Well, and there would not be a problem to have a basic grievance process procedure for other things, and then we keep this one embedded here, correct? We have to always, we wouldn't have to always come back to this particular policy and note 3, the 3-part A through, or it's really B, or the whole grievance process, right? Can't we have a procedure for other things that are more, or is it always have to come back to this policy for other things other than sexual harassment?
We can have another grievance procedure, and especially if we title it grievance procedure non-Title IX, or specifically reference in its title that this is a non-Title IX reporting formal investigation procedure.
That's what I was thinking, but have the exact same process. It's just non-Title IX.
Yes, so, and when we review our harassment policy, because if we one way or another we have to change the previous harassment policy for our other non-discriminated groups, or groups special. Oh, John, what's the term? I'm forgetting it. Special class? Is it special class? The non-discrimination again based on religion, sex, race.
Protected
class. Yes, protected class.
Protect.
So 413 is going to have to be reviewed because it includes harassment, which we have to cut the harassment part once this one is all set and ready to rock. And so then at that point, when we do that, prior leading up to it, if you wanted to make a stripped down version of a generic grievance process, non-Title IX.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I agree. I think the longer process is probably what we should do this for. And then have a
Did I hear a motion in there, Annie?
Yeah, I'm terrible with motions unless I'm staring it in the face. All right, I swear I get all nervous. All right, I'd like to make a motion. You guys all help me with this now. I'm not.
Well, wait.
Go ahead, Michelle.
So my question is this. This is our first read.
That's
of the
what I
full
think.
and complete one. So do we need to not motion yet because we need a secondary read next month? Like per mandate, because it is a full brand new policy. So I don't think we can motion anything because we don't have any
Yeah.
actionable changes to the policy, but we do need to do a second review. And I shared the notes that I took at the webinar. But again, just maybe mull it over or think about it a little, because then we would make a firm decision between the two.
I think so. Where are those notes found? Are they in? They're not in this packet, right?
No,
Are
no,
they
I
on
shared them. I shared them with everybody like months ago when
Oh
once
yeah, I
finished
saw
it.
that. Yeah, I
It was
did
like
when
an
I-
hour and 10 minutes. So I
Yes,
figured
yes,
not
yes.
everybody would have time.
Right. I
I
remember that, and I'm like, what hour? Yeah.
I know. And then John
All
has
right.
his notes too. And so he shared those with me. So we have mega notes.
So then maybe discussed, unless someone has it more, and then we'll go ahead and revisit to maybe approve this next board meeting. Does that sound right? All right, let's do that.
Lisa.
Any other questions on that? Okay. All right, let's go into 11A discussion for policy 103. I know we did do a quick read on this with some questions, and I don't know if a motion will come out of this. They're much smaller, obviously, but any discussion points on policy 103, complaint student, employees, parents, and other people? There's a lot of redlining there. This went through legal, as you remember.
And they're blue. They came from our legal counsel. So they're blue lines, but the blue lines really mean red lines.
Yes, well, I printed my old, this was printed a while ago. They still came out red, but any questions on this one?
The only question I had, let's see what page, page 90, under C, the director will respond in writing to the complaining party. Do we need to put a time frame in there, or do we just leave it open?
John, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I was having a hard time getting my mouse to cooperate with me. Yes, I don't know if you would want to put in a time frame because it depends on what it is that you're investigating. There have been some investigations that have gone on for several months and other complaints that can be done within weeks. So there's such variability in what the complaint is and the depth that it goes. I don't know if you want to put a time constraint in there, just because then you start to limit your ability to gather data just to comply with a time frame. I'd rather get it right than to rush through it just to meet a deadline.
What about a time frame to notify of the receipt of the complaint?
Receipt or progress?
I mean, just like I received your complaint, like a certain time frame.
No, I think that's that a time frame of a receipt of or acknowledgement of the receipt of the complaint. Yeah, I think that's perfectly realistic to put something in there. But I think that would, I think that would fall probably in paragraph A of section 2.
Yeah, that's where I'm making my notation. It seems like it would make sense to put that after the first sentence and before the third. Or sorry, before the second sentence. So just saying they can make the complaint, then the director will communicate an acknowledgement of the receipt of complaint within X calendar days, and then continue forward with the rest of the paragraph.
Yeah, are you talking between the second sentence and the third sentence?
Yeah, so after complaint and then before the director will make an initial determination.
Right, yep.
And what is that X amount of dates?
That's what I need to know.
Yeah, John.
I mean, how many calendar days just to acknowledge receipt of complaint?
I like school days rather than, because if you do calendar days and somebody, you have a break or a summer break or whatever, and there's no school days, then that gives you that period where somebody may not be available. Not that I would take time off, but I would like to someday. So, I like the idea of 3 business days or 5 business days. I would like 3 business days, or 3 school days would probably be a better way to put it, because I don't know if I've ever taken time off during a school day.
If we use the term school days, though, what happens in the summer if there's a complaint?
Well, then, yeah, that would be a business day. Yeah.
Business days would cover both school year and non-school.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Where in this policy, and maybe I'm missing it, or how does this align with what we talked about one other time with the command, the chain of command when there's a complaint about a teacher? It's not clear at all in this policy, and we had talked about, oh, there's a graph somewhere where you should know that this person if you complain about a teacher, it needs to go to the teacher first, then the high school director or the middle school director, and then the director. So this isn't tracking to me with that chain of command. So how can we clean that up?
One second. I'm pretty sure it's in the parent-student handbook.
So
yeah, so we have
this just doesn't seem to match that, and I think that's part of the confusion that parents have, including me. On it says to complain to the director here. It seems like, but that's not at all what's supposed to happen. So I think this policy needs quite a bit of work. I'm sorry, that's not what I mean. This needs to be clear for folks. What is the chain of command and how that works?
That's a very valid point, Rob, because we have our chain of communication where we're directing students and parents to try to come to a resolution with whatever their complaint is at the lowest level before it gets elevated. And this policy is saying something really contrary to that.
Yeah, I don't know why it couldn't just go after that first sentence after purpose, basically. Then the math and science takes all these things serious. The chain of communication is the first initiation of any complaint. So they really should know how to do that, how to go and use that chain of communication.
Well, and I would say too, we can definitely add those in. Although what this is doing is also saying that a complaint made to the director will determine where it goes. So if the complaint hasn't yet come to the teacher, the director would redirect that person to the teacher. But if you want, and it's perfectly, I don't want to do a screen share because I don't want to like interrupt our stuff, but on page 9 and 10 of the student parent handbook that is on the website, it has the order of it, but it also has a flow chart. So we can always put that flow chart at the end of the policy to say, reference flow chart on page whatever, if we wanted to put that as part of the purpose statement or the general statement of policy, and then just put that flow chart there. I don't know, does that make it feel too bulky?
I do think this is more like you have a complaint, you go to the director, and that's really not what we're trying to, that's not our first, not what we've been talking about all of these years now. No, there's a chain of communication, and then once it hits that, we've gone through that exhaustively or whatever. Yeah, so that would be a nice, easy way to do it.
So then would we perhaps say for the purpose statement, it says in the second sentence, if a specific complaint procedure is provided within any other policy of MSA, the specific procedure should be followed. We can cut that sentence and include that there is a general chain of communication, and it is as follows.
Yeah, I like that. And then if that reaches, because that really should, if there's a complaint with a teacher, that should be the first. If, and then I like that a lot. That's great.
Because I don't want to reference the page numbers from the handbook, since that does change from year to year. So I would hesitate to reference that specifically, but I can list it. And then at the end of the I can put an asterisk so that at the end of the policy that, there's a notation that there is a visual aid at the end of the policy, or like reference chain of communication flow chart on page 3.
I like that idea.
Okay.
I like it too.
Okay.
Thank you.
So then that means do we want to leave in the sentence then in paragraph A about any MSA employee receiving a complaint must advise the MSA director of the receipt of the complaint? Because if they're following the chain of communication, they're working out an issue with the teacher, that means they still have to contact and notify the director.
I think maybe if anything, changing it to recommend. I don't know. As a new teacher, you might not know that something is serious and that the director should be aware of it, Like sometimes I'll tell you of a complaint like, hey, this might come to you, just a heads up. So it's nice to know that we can let you know, I don't know about requiring it. Maybe not. I don't know. That's just a thought.
The reason I bring it up because, along that line, Gina, it is a really good idea to make sure that, especially the new staff, know that all administration is here to help them. However, there are a lot of things that teachers work out with parents and students at that level, and appropriately so. And really, I don't know if I need to know all of that.
Well, how about instead of notifying John directly, should it just, in the spirit of the chain of command, should they notify the next person in the chain? And then if it's appropriate, then it goes up the chain all the way to John.
Right.
If it doesn't get resolved, right?
Right.
I mean, honestly, I feel like I'm doing my job well when John isn't involved with stuff that I'm trying to work out with parents.
Yeah.
That's when I know I'm doing
Right. Yeah.
I still kind of like Gina's idea of saying that that any MSA employee receiving a complaint may advise the MSA director, because it may not just be teachers who receive the complaint.
I agree. And there's times I've done that.
Or just some wordsmithing where they may communicate with the MSA director or their building assistant director based on circumstance, just to like.
Right. I mean, you could put immediate supervisor in there. Because then if you're, you would talk to the assistant director, or in some cases directly to me as well.
Yeah, because I'm in building D, so you are my building supervisor.
Right. You can't put that blanket statement in there, but and that goes back to something that Miss Wynn said today about nobody likes to be blindsided or caught off guard. It's always nice to know ahead of time if there's an issue that's coming up.
Which is the whole purpose of the chain of command, right?
Right.
Or chain of communication.
Right.
So when it gets that, then you're aware of it. But it hopefully doesn't get there. Hopefully you aren't involved in things. that we can fix in the classroom.
Right.
Or based on the language, if we insert the chain of communication in procedure, the last sentence says, if a specific complaint procedure is not provided, the purpose of this is to provide one. So if we provide the procedure before then, everything else follows is just what is intended.
Right.
So if it's something that doesn't fit the procedure, you know?
But the other thing I guess you have to remember is, if I have a complaint, I'm probably going to read this document. I may not look at what's in the student handbook. So this is what's going to tell me what to do. So if it, and I may not know that it doesn't fit somewhere else. And so I'm just going to, well, it says to go here, that's where I'm going. So
yeah,
we have to spell it out enough so that they
Yeah.
know, okay, this is where you need to go.
So if we have the chain of communication as part of the purpose statement with the flow chart attached as a visual on page 2, then I think the rest of it, beyond acknowledging the receipt within, you know, 3 business days, I think the rest of it probably still stands, because if somebody, if the, you know, I think just saying the employee may advise their immediate supervisor, and then the rest of it is just if it's a serious allegation.
I agree. And then it's a step up anyway.
Because I can do, those changes are relatively minor and actually repeating existing procedures that we have. So I can use it as I can just do a consent agenda next meeting.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'm beginning to love consent agenda.
They're pretty great.
I'm like, whoa, whoop, whoop, whoop. Yeah. See, this science girl can learn a thing about governance.
I know we're all trying, and every now and again.
I am. I've learned. This has grown me in more ways. I didn't think I could grow this much, but really, it's been really kind of cool that way. Sometimes.
Okay, so then as we proceed, when it comes to discussing policy 103, for our discussion notes, because I was writing, not typing, because I was writing on there. So for the discussion notes, again, I think that we don't make a formal motion, because we'll have a consent agenda with approved based on the changes proposed this meeting.
I think that's great.
Can I just ask, what happens if there is a problem with something that's on a consent agenda? That part I've never quite understood about a consent agenda. When
and you
does
take
that
it out
get
of
brought
consent.
up?
When we're approving the agenda, you ask to remove it from consent and move to discussion.
Okay. So that's how you, okay, that part I've just never sure of.
Yes. All right. Any more thoughts on item 3B? All right, we'll move on to 3C, discussion of policy 429, suspected misconduct and dishonesty by employees and others. A lot of red lining or blue lining or whatever color lining we had. So I know, Rob, you had some issues with this when that first came to the board also. So I don't know if with the procedures, the additional responsibilities I think you had. So we could speak to that a little more. I don't know if that's still an issue, but.
Should I John, do you want me to, or do you want to update what our council said with regard to the procedures section? Because he did update us about that section.
If you want to go ahead, I'm not sure what you had in mind. So if you want to go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
Swear that is the quote of 2020. All right, so when we were looking at the policies, his idea as we go forward for policy 429, when he was looking at it, he reviewed our procedures, and his feedback was that it appears the protocols referred to sort of concern of training and oversight, and that it appears what is required. So if we have, he said, for example, if MSA has an employee handbook, then a provision identifying prohibited conduct along with guidance concerning discipline for violations, etc. There could be some sort of staff training concerning the handbook. So when he was looking at it, his focus is on training what constitutes misconduct and dishonesty, what supervisors and staff have to do to prevent it, and what steps need to be taken when it is observed, and then the steps taken in the event that it occurs. So I think when he talked about the procedures, he was focusing a little bit more on things that we may already have rather than starting completely from scratch with regard to the responsibilities of the director. But he says that what is required is for the director to engage in supervision, evaluation, management, and training. And I know the handbook will be reviewed. I think we're probably going to have to start in March. But I think as long as we make sure that that handbook procedural element is really tightened up, I don't think we need to have a whole new procedure developed.
Do you think we need to reference at all the handbook for these, Michelle, or?
In reverse.
In reverse.
Yeah, so in the reverse, so in the handbook, reference this policy.
Reference
so
this
when
policy.
you have those, reference this policy, because the handbook is a little bit, it changes every year a little bit and stuff like that.
Right. Okay, I got it.
And,
all right, that makes sense.
And isn't it true that a human resources always, whatever, legally is above a academic policy manual, right? As far as legally, right? Legally bound, right? A human resources. So at least at our institution, the employee handbook trumps the faculty handbook in any spot where there's issues legally.
That's a good question.
That's a weird one because technically the handbook, as I understand it, the handbook is an extension of our contract. So it's part of our roles and responsibilities, whatever is in there, the teacher handbook. But it's also a benefits manual, so it's kind of a weird document. But regardless, if we reference the policy in it, I think then the policy would still take precedent. That's what I would think.
No, yeah, absolutely.
It has other stuff, yeah.
So are there any other thoughts on this one? I know that, again, this will probably have to come back as I'm hoping maybe consent agenda in addition to 103, but are there any thoughts, additional questions, thoughts about this? No? Michelle, John?
I was just going to say, Michelle, at the very end, we don't have any, there's no legal references or anything. Was there? I don't remember.
There are. Yeah, when I get like the final version of it, I have to redo his because he did track changes instead.
Yeah.
So I have to redo
Okay.
the thing.
Yeah, he did.
That's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have the legal cross references in there as well. So then I think it's perfectly fine update, especially if we reference this policy in the handbook, and then in the handbook, we specifically make a point of ABC. So like A, what constitutes it, B, what, so use his specific headers in the handbook to reflect his advice. I think that helps close our loop.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't want to leave it open-ended or leave it up to interpretation.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. No, closing the loop is a good thing.
I don't like open-ended policy. That's not a good.
No. All right. Shall we move on? Yeah, that was a biggie. Those are 3 biggies, I'm telling you. Very good. All right. Okay, so let's head into our discussion and decisions for our business items 12. At this point, there's no motions or anything for 12A, so we'll just have a discussion on enrollment procedures. And John, I'm going to bring that to you.
Yeah, this is more just to make everybody aware of it. There have not been any changes to our enrollment procedure, but you should be aware that we are now collecting, as I talked about earlier, we are now collecting applications for next year. It's on the website under the prospective families. There's a couple of tabs, the admissions process and then the apply online process. So if somebody approaches you about applying to MSA, that's where you should just direct them to. Once again, it's the prospective families tab on the website, and then they can apply online. Our lottery will be done on February 9th at 9 a.m. And more than likely we'll have it for every single grade, as we have done in the past. The other part of that is there is a requirement for a couple of board members to be present. So if Ms. Punsack reaches out to you, please consider it. Typically she's there, I'm there, another administrator is there, and then we like to have 2 board members there just to witness this. It's all done random by lot, and I don't know if I need to go into any further depth. I guess if there's questions, I'll field them. Otherwise, it's pretty self-explanatory, and we haven't changed anything from last year.
And also, if you'd like to, I was going to say, if you'd like to volunteer, get a hold of Ms. Punsack. You don't have to wait for the invite.
My question is, I just didn't remember the numbers. So how many first year or 6th graders are we thinking about letting in? And so how is that different than last year?
So that's what the board will need to assign next month. You'll actually have to set the capacities, and that's how many we draw for then.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Adam, I apologize for cutting you off. Did you have anything to contribute that I?
No, I just said that it's kind of fun. I was there last year.
Yeah, volunteer too if you feel like, you want to. All right. Well, so this next part, 12B, is a discussion of the board self-evaluation. I guess in many years there's been formal ones and informal ones and surveys, and so I asked John, what does that even mean? And he said, well, it's been informal in the past, where we just talk about how we're doing. We're halfway through now, the school year. And I'm like, informal sounds good for me, because you know how many Google forms I've sent to my way this year? Didn't even know that was a thing till lockdown. So I just thought we'd discuss it. How are we doing? How do y'all feel we're doing? We're about halfway through, and we'll just have a little discussion. What do you think?
Or may I offer, how about if everybody shares one thing that they think that's going well, and one thing that they'd like us to, or maybe that they're looking forward to improving, and I'll start. Just so everybody has a little bit of time to think. The one thing I think that's going well, I think we have a lot of good discussion, and I think everybody is not afraid to voice their opinion when they have it, which is a really good thing. I like the diversity of thought on the board. The one thing I guess that I'm looking forward to the most is coming up, and that's the strategic planning, because the mission and vision of the school, I think, does need to be tweaked. I don't think we need to blow it up, start over. I really like it, but I think we do need to do some tweaking to it. So I'm really looking forward to our strategic planning. With that, I'll be quiet.
I can hop in here. One thing I'm missing is just the general interaction with folks, right? I mean, when we would go to activities, it was very easy to poll or talk to 4 or 5 different parents that are sitting around me. How are things going and what's on your mind? And I'm really missing that right now, I'll be honest. So I love the Zoom. I love the fact that we've embraced this, and I think we're getting more and more proficient at it, unfortunately, because we have to, right? And it's changed some of the way we do things. I think we've managed that well, but I do miss just this general, like, I feel like I have to kind of reach out in different and harder ways than before. It just came easy. So maybe we were spoiled before. And now I'm waiting for the open forum letters, and the open forum letters tend to be more on the negative side than the positive. That's just life. But so anyways,
so last Monday, I got to attend one of the student meeting groups, and I really miss I'm here to connect with students and make sure their learning is very, the best it can be. So that was really rewarding for me. And we even talked about maybe some of the positive things that have come out of this year, and some had some really good answers. So I'm glad to see that some students were getting something positive from all this. And another thing is I'm an accountant. I'm learning a lot about our school's finances, and I'm really looking forward to trying to improve them, though it sounds like from our visitor today that we're doing pretty well to begin with, so there might not be much room to improve on. So I guess more of the focus is just keeping us in a good spot. So
Oh, come on, y'all. I'm checking off who's talking. So if you haven't talked, you better start.
Typing. Give me one hot second. Okay, so I haven't finished my soup, sorry. All right, so I think that I will say one thing as a board that I very much appreciate that has been going really well is that everybody reads their materials and comes prepared. And that probably sounds really, really nerdy, but the fact that we all come prepared helps us streamline, because even though our meetings can be long, sometimes they would be longer if we had to review what was already in the packet before we could talk about what was in the packet. So I appreciate everybody prepping and just being ready to engage and do our best for MSA, which I appreciate. Got to type that down. And then I think what I am looking most forward to is, I would say, continuing to try to maximize our strengths and minimize things that have been areas of weakness. So we've identified some, and I look forward to figuring out some of those. For example, our sustainability. That's a key area where we've got to work, and I look forward to trying to figure out some new and creative ways.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, who's next?
I can go next. I would say that I can tell that this is a strong board. Like, you all care about the pieces of concern, and you do your research. And I think that's pretty cool to walk into. I wouldn't say that this is a concern or anything. I would just say something to keep in mind once I'm gone is, because I mean, my term will be up very soon, if not sooner, if Judy returns. So just the continuation of information for new board members, because some things just tend to get lost. So that's just one thing to always keep in mind.
All right, how about the rest of you?
I have really enjoyed the trainings that we've had, all the required training, and I don't know, just all the other training I've been at. But I really wish we could be in person. I feel like sometimes I don't know what's going on, and I think it would be helpful if we could be in person, just talking to each other, but that'll come.
Speaking of training, one thing that I've found that we've done very well is our discussions definitely bring up some conflicting perspectives. And the fact that we can then walk away from those discussions with a united front is something that I've heard while I was doing board training, not all schools can do. The fact that we're doing that is incredible to me. And I think that we need to continue being that united front, but also bringing those different perspectives as well. Because if we're all bringing the same perspective, are we really doing the best that we can for the school and its most important stakeholders, the students? One thing that I'm looking forward to is, getting rid of the COVID agenda items. That'll be nice to change.
I would say I like how the fact that we have really learned things as a board. We've become more efficient because we're learning. And I think adding things to the consent agenda and understanding that, and not rereading the board minutes or the committee minutes, that's all things that we are learning. And we're not saying, well, nope, we've always done it that way, so we have to do it that way. I think that's just been a good thing that we've been employed. And one of the things I'm looking forward to is finding ways to continue to push us to be more innovative as a school. I think things have gotten in the way, I'm sure, but what are things that we could do to double our waiting list, because we are doing things that people just are really seeking.
How about Paula? And Paula, how about you?
I think just from a student perspective, coming onto the board, especially when we talk about finances and other stuff, obviously I don't exactly know what's going on, but I've really had an opportunity to learn and just eventually one day in the future what this experience is like. And I think what I'm looking forward to is just having more student involvement as a whole in our school and making sure that students are aware of the fact of the board and what's going on the board.
Excellent. How about you, Maggie?
Well, for me, it's been really nice seeing Adam and Cody, even though it hasn't been in person, just because it just makes me smile and proud. So it's so nice to see you too, even though it's odd, but and hearing your involvement and that you still care so much about the school and that you want to be here. And it's so rewarding. So I enjoy that so much. I'm really looking forward to finding out more about expansion. I really am. And just like, what are the possibilities and where we could be headed. And I think all that we're doing is leading toward that. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is a tough year, I think, to be on the board. I mean, I say, what are we not doing well? Well, COVID always is. I lose sleep over this. I do want kids back. I suffer for that. I understand safety and I understand that, but I suffer for that. And I'm just going to continue suffering until this stupid thing is in the rearview mirror. What I've loved about it is it's grown me in ways I've never thought possible. I mean, I'm an older person, so I'm surprised I could grow this much at this age. So I suppose that's good. And I love my school, and I'm very flawed in some of how I try and lead these meetings, but I do it for the love of MSA. So I love that I still love MSA. So that's it. And anything else anyone wants to say? All right, very good. Thank you so much for that. So next step on the agenda is to solicit community members. Speaking of how great this board is, we do have 2 positions, and apparently over the years, sometimes it would be late to the game. So this is a lot of you out there in virtual land. I'm speaking to you, or maybe I'm speaking to the hearts of people like Robert and Adam, who will be exiting this board, because maybe you want to try it again for another 3 years. Who knows? So we do need to replace 1 community member and 1 parent for next board. And I would really like to ask people to sign up for the board out there. We need you. MSA, I'll be hitting up the teachers next 2021, but I'm hitting up community members and parents. So please come join the board when we start asking for it. You will grow in ways. And this really is the best gig school. There's the best gig around. I'm telling you, I've worked at 5 schools, so help be part of us. All right, so that's my big thing there. Okay, we would like to then, I'll go ahead and move to approve the membership, item number 12D, business item. Move to approve the membership to MACS. Do I have a second?
This is Jennifer. I second.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jennifer. All right, any discussion on that? John put that at the very back so you can kind of see what we do. Is there any discussions on that or questions about what this is and how it helps really all of us here, including the we're pretty cheap now. You know, the MACS, I'm like, what? It's that cheap to be a member? That's because of the back pages and the cost of it. But there's no discussion points that I'd like to move to approve this membership or to roll call the approval. So
do we need to
Yes.
select a payment plan for
Oh,
this?
that's true. There was 2 payment plans.
Yeah, we can either do one annual payment or monthly
That's
payments.
true. Or traditionally, what do we do, John? That was one of my questions I actually had. Is it a yearly $7,000, whatever it was, versus?
Typically, we just pay it in one lump sum and they're done.
Should we then approve to pay the one?
Yeah, we typically have done the annual payment plan.
Yeah,
and which is plan 2 on page 98.
So I like to approve, we first and second to approve the second payment plan, 1 installment. So I'll roll call on approval of that. Dan Ellingson,
Yes.
Cody Schneid,
Yes.
Michelle Kurkowski,
Yes.
Gina Albers,
Yes.
Adam Bard,
Yes.
Rob Kruger,
Yes.
Jennifer Bartle,
Yes.
Maggie Bergraff,
Yes.
Annie Cardenas, yes. That is all yes. Motion carries. All right, let's move into, the review of the strategic plan process. It's just really me informing you all. You know, our first date together in our strategic plan retreat is on January 11th at 6 p.m. John and I have been meeting with Don, one lengthier meeting to talk about it. And I'm really excited. I got to tell you, there's a lot of things he's talking about, the SWOT process, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, how he's going to lead us into this. He's promised that both the January and the February strategic plan retreat, he will try and keep to 90 minutes. He will be honoring that 90 minutes, so we won't be there a long, long time. But in March, he's also mentioned that, you know, if we need that, he asked if we should have a 4th date. I'm like, geez, I don't know if any of us could take all that and COVID at the same time. But he did say maybe the 3rd, the 111 and the 222 at 6 p.m. will be hosted at 90 minutes. And then on 329, our 3rd, if we have to go longer, we will, just so we don't have to have a 4th. But he's really excited. We have Tom Johnson, who has raised his hand and will be part of this to do all of the technology for us. So he'll be working with Don on the technology aspect so we can actually enjoy what we are doing for our school and our strategic plan, complete, you know, the complete strategic plan retreat process or whatever. So I'm excited about that. And then there'll be live streams. So all of you in virtual land, I hope you join us. And, you know, just a lot of the things, you know, he was talking about, all his little vocab about having opportunities and threats and looking at some of our, you know, good is the enemy of great, and all of this he'll be bringing into our conversations, into our strategic plan. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too. And thank you. January is tough because 3 meetings, but we're going to do this together. So anyway, that's all I have on that. Now we're at business item 4F, discussion, possible approval. And I'm going to go ahead and let Michelle open that up because this is her her motion. So if you want to go ahead and motion that, Michelle, and start with that.
All right, so one of the things that just has kind of gone back and forth about where it needs a home is our diverse hiring task force. And it is part of our SAM goals for staff diversity is goal 6 under, it's goal 6 as one of our non-academic SAM goals. But also part of our training and things like classes and electives and things that we're trying to offer. So the diverse hiring task force needs a home, and it was in academics for a while. But when John and I were looking at the agenda, I was like, does it really fit in academics? And my initial argument was yes, because having staff that reflects our population does help students do academically better. It helps improve. If there's people are in a school and we're all together, we all see each other, and you start to feel more comfortable if somewhere within the building, students see staff members that look like them. And so I thought initially academics, but then John brought it up that it didn't make sense to be in academics because it was less direct tie-in to our purpose. And so the thought was brought up that it would be good to include this as a personnel committee role, because personnel committee, while right now is defined as figuring out evaluations, in general, hiring is part of personnel, like as a concept. So I have a motion that would change the purpose of the committee to include review and oversight of the diverse hiring task force associated with our authorizer goals. Because it seemed to be a fit there. And when we had talked about it in academics, it seemed like that would be a good fit.
Was that a motion?
I think, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, was that a motion? Or
I
was
have
that
the
just-
motion there. I just didn't know if anybody had thoughts, ideas.
Aren't we supposed to just, might as well put it on the table, right, Annie, and then comment on it?
I think so.
Yeah, I think we need to definitely comment on it for sure. So should we go ahead and, do you want to motion it, Michelle, and we'll second it, and then we'll discuss and then vote?
Yes, I will make the motion.
And I will second it. This is Rob.
All right. So discussion point. So my main thing is our purpose. So I struggle with this myself, being on the personnel committee with 2 other board members. And my struggle is this, that we haven't had personnel be part of hiring of anybody for a while. In fact, I think when I went back to Sherry's personnel committee notes in 2012, 13 was the last time personnel was really involved in hiring. So our main purpose, so I'm thinking our committee, the purpose of our committee is to create an evaluation process for the director, add to provide input feedback so the director can create or modify evaluation procedures for all staff members, including administration, teams, teachers, and EAs. So we haven't been a part of hiring, I know, since John's been here. That's not what personnel is doing. And we're in focused work right now. We're very focused in getting through these basic evaluate the job descriptions and evaluations to match. And we're now on the assistant directors, and we have a battery of other people to get through, EAs and teachers and John, we really, there's a lot of work done just presently. So I think I'm worried about the focus now being shifted into something we haven't been doing for 4 years that I've been back. This is not part of this. And then I know it's a part of our goals, but this is a task force. So I don't understand, like, if John is in charge of hiring, why we're putting a task force mission into us when we're not in charge of any of the other hiring. It's this part. So that's my concern, is that we lose focus, and it's really never been part of personnel for, at least since John, have you been here? Is that right? You've been the authorizer and hiring.
That's been a procedure before me when Mr. Kreischer was here. So like you said, it goes back to basically 2012. And that was, the 3 years before I was here. I believe that's the procedure that he pretty much followed.
And then I will note, prior to that, the personnel committees, one of their key things was actually hiring and helping with the interview process and helping go through resumes. So that was something that Mr. Kreischer specifically changed. So it has shifted over time. And this task force just started last spring with these goals, with the publication of, so they just had started with our hiring last year to change some of our language. So it's relatively new in general. And it needs to be somewhere, because it needs to be accountable somewhere. And so it doesn't have to be that you like do it, but just, that.
Does a task force has to be accountable to somewhere? Or, hiring part, or is that something that can be on a report? I don't understand why does it have to be accountable when other things get hired that aren't accountable to a committee?
I don't understand what you mean.
Can I interject one thing?
Yeah,
before you continue? From an administrative point of view, we have, the board really hires or looks for personnel for two specific reasons. One is to find other board members, and the other one is to hire a director. Then the rest of the hiring procedures all basically fall underneath the director and the administration. And that's why this is a task force and not a committee or a subcommittee. And if it does become a part of a committee, I would respectfully request that the name task force be taken off, because I specifically, when I came here, put task force associated with anything that's done administratively, so that people can look at it and know this is a board function, this is an administrative function. So if it's a task force, this falls under the administrative function. So everybody at this point right now knows this is a task force. This is something the administration does. We don't, and the big difference is, from an administrative point of view, we don't have to comply with open meeting laws, because we're not we're not falling underneath the open meeting law like a task force, or a subcommittee or a committee, or this particular group is. As far as reporting goes, I think the simple thing to do for this is, now that this task force is going to start meeting again, and there was no real purpose to meet at the beginning of the school year, because there weren't any particular people being looked at to be hired at the time. And now that the focus will be coming up when we start to hire in the May through the summer time frame, having the task force, be reported back to the board in the director's report to me would make the most sense. It has the visibility of the board at that point, because then you can look at it and ask specific questions, and you're not losing the visibility. But it's not going to meet every month all year round. It's going to meet as needed. And we may meet twice in a month. We may meet once in a month. But the beauty of having it in a task force is we have that flexibility. If we need to meet in a week, we can meet in a week. We don't have to, put out and have the 3-day public notice. So my preference would be that you leave it as a task force. I can incorporate it into the monthly report to the board when we meet, if you would like to have the visibility.
And I think that doing that is good. I mean, and the reason why I had it on, because again, originally it came out of academics as something to address with our SAM goal. So that's, why I was having it there from previous year. And I think the key thing is that we just need to move away from the idea that we only need to call the committee when we're hiring. The purpose of it is that we need to go beyond saying that we only hire from the applicants that we receive. We only post in like one spot. So I just really want to, in the director's report task force information, if that's the way we go, I want to see what steps are being taken to expand where we are looking and how we are recruiting. That is how we expand our diversity.
So is that why you feel, Michelle, that it has to be under something that's a worry that gets lost, or SAM goal?
I am concerned, yes.
Yeah, so because I knew there was something, like I wasn't clear on why it was coming to personnel, even though, because we don't do any of the other hiring, like what,
I understand. It was suggested in academics and agreed upon to bring it to see whether or not personnel would be the good spot for it. So I'm following through with that discussion.
Yeah.
Didn't we talk about world's best workforce, that it might fall under that?
That's what I was thinking.
That's what I remember. And I could be.
Yeah, sure. It was, that's what we were trying to figure out. And it was part of the updates for that, but then Tom didn't have those because he's not, wasn't, so that's how it got separated out. Because a lot of the world's best workforce data that we have is involved in testing and some of those other things.
But it was clear markers for diversity, though. That was the whole thing, is that world's best workforce is making sure our achievement gap is closed, and it was all kind of the same.
Which would make it to make sense as part of an academics committee update. But again, it keeps going in circles. So I just want to make sure that we're fulfilling the spirit of what our goal is and expanding beyond our existing strategies so that we can have a shift and a change. So however that happens or wherever it's updated, that's totally fine. But I mean, I just don't want us to lose track of it, because I know that our testing goals are dominant. And I know that we're going to be worried because we haven't had testing data. So we're going to really be trying to figure out some of those other goals. And I just don't want to lose track of this one until
Well,
it's,
we will
too
be
late.
hiring most likely. I just worry that we're going to lose our focus, and we haven't been part of hiring in years. And I don't know why it would come back to us that way, even though personnel is surprisingly should be part of hiring, but it isn't, and it hasn't. So,
and it may be that that's a thing to visit as a committee as well, if that's still the path of the future. I don't know. I'm just bringing it up because I'm trying to find the right fit.
Any other thoughts there? I mean, Jennifer and Rob, just being part of personnel, your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I kind of think it should be under the director, but it seems like in personnel, we have a lot going already, but I don't know.
Well, I agree with John in the fact that we should be very clear where task forces live, and I think that should be administration. Absolutely. What I don't necessarily agree with is just leaving it there and not doing what we need to do towards the SAM goal. So that's where our quandary is, and I'm not sure we can fix that here now, but maybe we have to start the discussion. But I agree with both camps, but we've got a disconnect there.
And I mean, we can table it and bring it up again, but one way or another, this is a football that's been punted back and forth a few times. It needs a home in one way or another, just somewhere.
I mean, one good thing is that people sign up for the diversity task force. So even though personnel would be the home for it, it's not like people on the personnel would necessarily have to be doing it. It would just be an oversight thing, like, hey, where is the progress? Kind of like what we do in academics with the task forces. And so for those who are worried on the personnel team that this would take a lot of time, we already have the task force with those people. It would just be checking in on them. Correct, Michelle?
That was the intent. It was the intent, yes, similar to what the World's Best Workforce does for academics, and
So do you leave all those as task force, John? Like you said, you wanted the name changed, or you don't want it as a task force.
Right.
Do task force come to the academics, and you don't have to worry about changing the name like you would this?
Well, if you are having a task force report back to a committee, technically, I would argue that's a subcommittee. That is not a task force, because they're reporting back to the committee, which means that the committee has oversight of that, which is by de facto a subcommittee. Just like the World's Best Workforce is a subcommittee of the academics committee. And it should be, because of the amount of reports that are required to go to MDE, and the focus of it is all academic. So I would argue, the World's Best Workforce belongs with academics committee. If you're going to put the task force underneath another committee, I would want the name changed, and then you're going to have to comply with the open meeting law, because it is a subcommittee. It's not a task force.
And I would also argue that if we have the diverse task force, it's going to be under the personnel. We should have all hiring under the personnel. Why would we just do some and not others? So I'm not sure that's, given what the personnel committee has been doing over the last 3-4 years, which is not hiring. I don't think it belongs there, especially considering our purpose statement.
And I guess I'm going to push back just a little bit on the SAM goal. The whole reason this task force was begun last year was in response to the SAM goal, that we look for ways to hire more diverse staff members. And through the process last year, we came up with a very revamped way of posting our positions in the desired goal of attracting more applicants that were of color, which we have been able to do some, not enough, obviously, but we have been able to get more applicants of color to at least investigate the school. Now, they have to be highly qualified and meet, the standards of MSA as well. We're not going to hire somebody just because they apply and they check one box, but they don't meet the vision and the culture of the school as well. So I'm not saying the work is definitely not done, and the goal is still there, and it's not going away. So until we meet our goal and have the composition of our staff representative of our student population, this task force isn't going to go away.
So what do we do is the question with the task force or subcommittee? I don't know. If we want to vote on this motion straight up, then we can, or I don't know.
Well, just one more clarification point. It's not really the hiring, it's just more the expansion of soliciting the people. Correct, Michelle?
Yes, it's the strategy. So the way the goal is written was to be more actively recruiting individuals and hire at least one highly qualified staff member representative of each student group publicly reported to MDE. And so the first step of the diverse task force was to change the language in our posting that we seek and encourage a diverse staff. And I think this year, the most recent posting added, I think, a sentence or two to delineate that highly qualified may include like a newer teacher, but somebody who also had additional experience in other areas, if I'm correct, or at least that was what they were thinking of. But also we just need to change how we're recruiting. So that strategy needs to really be developed. Like going beyond the online posting, shifting out, and going around, stuff like that. So yeah, it's more about how, more about strategy.
But the purpose of recruiting is about hiring. The actual active recruiting is about hiring, I feel.
At its core, yeah, but I mean, remember, it's not doing we wouldn't be doing that task force doesn't make the post on the MSA site, or they wouldn't necessarily attend the job fair. They're helping to develop the strategy by which the administrative team can go forward with those recruitment efforts. So they're just helping them develop the strategy for it. That's kind of how I was looking at it. But this was my conundrum.
Yes, it is a conundrum. It's a conundrum because it doesn't match the personnel. For me, it's a conundrum because it absolutely doesn't match the purpose of the personnel, which unfortunately we're on focused business. And so that's, for me, that's how I feel. I don't know how this ended up over here, but if it needs a home, I mean, I don't know why it needed a home, but now I'm more clear on that. So I don't know. What shall we do, board? I've exhausted anything. I don't want to say anything else. How should we proceed?
Wasn't the motion to change the purpose of the committee?
That was my original motion, yeah.
Okay, shall we vote?
Well, actually, I just have one more question. So the two alternatives is that we push it down the road or that we put it on the director's report, correct? Okay.
All right.
What do you mean by push it down the road? What do you mean by that?
Like find another home for it with more time, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can vote on this motion, and if I don't know what else to say. All right, motion. Yeah, we'll go ahead and vote on this motion. Dan Ellingston.
I'm torn on this one. Can I abstain? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Cody Schneid.
No. I'm gonna
Michelle
go.
Kirkowski. Oh, excuse me.
I'm gonna go with no.
Okay. Michelle Kirkowski,
Yes.
Gina Alberts,
Yes.
Adam Bartz,
Yes.
Robert Kruger,
Yes.
Jennifer Bartle,
No.
Maggie Bergrath,
No.
Annie Cardenas? No. So we are at, I think we might have to have a revote because we had 4 yeses, 4 nos, and 1 abstention. So do we revote? How does that work? Help me out, people.
You need a majority to pass. So if it doesn't have a majority, it would fail.
Okay. All right. So 4 yeses, 4 no, 1 abstention. Motion does not carry. All right. All right, we'll go on to the next then item here. Let's see here. Okay, so John, you're up for our business item discussion 12G, which is discuss monthly COVID evaluation.
Yeah, so back on page 18, I guess it kind of hit on a number of those items with, I didn't go through the Friday results in depth, but we kind of talked about that. So back on page 18 is basically the update. Probably a couple of things that are more of highlight. Nothing has really changed a lot from last month, other than the administrative recommendations where the governor's new guidelines came out. They are that elementary schools, may go in full in-person learning, and then it depends on where they were. Obviously, that does not impact us because we start at grade 6 and that's typically K5. So that guideline really didn't impact us much. There were a few changes to the Safe Learning Plan that were going into effect at the start of the upcoming school year, or calendar year, I should say, not school year. One of those is that if you have people in person or students in person, you must wear a mask and a shield, both. You cannot have one or the other. You must do both. Just a mask is not good enough anymore. And this goes back to some of the initial findings, and this is from MDH, that were determined when in the healthcare industry, when they were wearing both, the infection rates were a lot less. So the governor and MDH are trying to mitigate the transmission by including both a face mask and a shield whenever there's students and staff present. The other part of this is then there's a 2-week saliva testing for staff members once you have students on site. So then every 2 weeks, you would offer testing for employees that would like to be tested. You cannot mandate that employees be tested. You have to offer it. And this would be for those of you that have taken the saliva test through Vault. It's basically that same test. However, the requirement is that the school would have to have on-site coordinators for this. And excuse me, a point of clarification that I hope to get on Wednesday morning when I attend their training for this new requirement is when they say a building coordinator, are they talking middle school or a high school level? Just what do they mean by when they say a building? Because the current state of their directive is each building must have a coordinator. Well, in our case, we have 4 buildings. So does that mean we have to have 4 building test coordinators? Or can we get by with 1, or can we get by with 2 because we have the middle school and high school? So that's a clarification that I need to have from MDE because it does have a bigger impact on the number of people that have to go through training to become a test coordinator. So I guess stay tuned, more information will be coming out on that. Currently, we do not meet the board approved levels for COVID to have any on-campus activities. Just a reminder, it was 50. We had to have a case level at the county of 50 or less with no MSA staff members testing positive to have students back on campus. For outdoor activities, the board did not set anything, but talking with the activities director, we decided outdoor activities such as Nordic ski, if we were at 75 or less, being it's an outdoor activity and they train in pods, we would allow them then to have in-person practices beginning then. The other part of that that's not in on page 18 is some guidance that the State High School League has released, and I have not been able to talk with the assistant director about what came out of the meeting she had today with the State High School League, but they are allowing schools to start practice on January 4th. If the current levels stay where they're at, we would not be having practices on campus because the current level of 80 is higher than our approved 50, so we would not be having practices on campus. If we do begin the basketball program, they would start out in practice mode only, and that's where the state's at. I've heard talking with some other school officials from traditional schools that they do plan on starting practice on the 4th and having games as early as the 18th. I don't know if that's been approved by the state or not, but I know that's what some of those schools are planning on. But they're also in much bigger conferences than we are. And a lot of the schools in our conference do not plan on having basketball. So a competitive schedule for a basketball team at this point is not highly likely. But we would, if the levels were allowed, we would definitely have practices. And then I guess we have to, go from there to see what other schools in the conference would be willing to have games with us. At worst, we would have practices and basically a lot of intramural type of games, so the students are able to at least come on campus, practice, continue their skill set, and have some competitions within themselves. That also, by doing that, also allows us to keep the bubble, so to speak, or the number of contacts at a lower level. And then given that information from MDH where they're planning or anticipating another wave coming in January, February timeframe, lends to the possibility of a lot more transmission if you're competing with schools, say for example in Minneapolis or in Dakota County or wherever outside of the Woodbury area, you're now increasing your exposure. So a lot of the State High School League activities, I guess, is a lot of we have to wait and see how the COVID numbers go, and then that kind of dictates which direction we'll be headed.
And that information gets to parents, right? The community who are involved in sports. Because I know I've gotten a few emails about it, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. So hopefully that gets to people immediately once.
Right. Yeah. Once we're at that level where we can begin, or we get to a week out where we can anticipate that we'll be able to begin practices, that information will be disseminated to the coaches, and I'm sure they will disseminate that to all the players so they know at least a week in advance.
Or at least the decision not to.
Right. Yeah. As of right now, there is no activities going on.
John, I had a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the saliva tests for staff.
Yes.
Do we pay for that, or does the state pay for that, or do we get reimbursed, or how?
At this time, it's free to the schools until the funding goes out. They had no time frame as to when that would go out, as far as them being free. And I would anticipate at the point when the state can no longer provide free testing, that mandate would probably go away. But we've seen a lot of other unfunded mandates. So yeah, I can't guarantee you that's going to happen. But at this point right now, they said those tests would be free until there's no more money left basically to pay for the tests.
Okay. Do we have an idea if we had to pay for them, how much they are, or is that?
I don't even know how much one test costs. No, I couldn't answer that.
Okay. Okay.
And then John, I had one question too. With regard to the outdoor number being different than the indoor number, has that been communicated to families?
I know that I personally haven't communicated that. I'm not sure if the activities director has communicated that to the families or not. To the one family that did inquire, I know I replied and told them the number, but I don't know. I would have to double check with the activities director to find out if that's been communicated. I would anticipate that she's probably going to be sending out some new information based on the meeting that she had today. I would imagine if that hasn't been communicated, that'll be included in that communication.
Okay, because looking at our, semester one learning and latest updates and things like that, there hasn't been an update to that tab on the website since November 30th. So for those sorts of, with the revised school schedule, but those kind of things definitely should be updated just so that everybody knows aware, because there is a difference in the number, and just so that everybody is fully aware of what those are and what that circumstance is.
I would say that would save a lot of angst for everybody, just because for people who can't come to class, who really want to come back hybrid, and this whole pandemic has been very harsh on, they want their sports. Families want to be back in sports, want to be, and if there is that communication, just helps everybody, and it needs to be disseminated immediately once it's found. Because I get a lot of emails, I get emails on it, and so I shouldn't be getting emails on it if we can provide that information.
I do know, I just got a text from the activities director, and the coaches are aware of that number. So there may be, I don't know if that's filtered down to the individual level, but that's something we can follow up on.
Yeah, and it should be on the website.
Yeah.
Like those are pretty big updates, they'll be there.
No, that is definitely something we can include in the announcements.
Because that's just some normal thing, something normal to give our families. Anytime we can give somebody normal right now, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then Southwash, what's the scoop on how they're rolling out? Are they, I know they had an original December opening, but I don't know have you heard?
I looked at their website just recently. They haven't updated, and there was no prior communication. So if they're following what MDE is, the requirement from MDE was in order for them to go to in person before the 18th of January, they would have had to contacted the parents previously before the governor came out with his information. I do not believe, and I haven't seen anywhere where that's happened. So then that would mean they could roll out K through 2, grades K through 2 on the 18th of January. They have to wait 2 weeks before they can bring in another pot of students. So then they could bring the rest of the grades up to grade 5 2 weeks after that. So by the end of January 25th, they could be having their elementary back on campus. but the high school would still be distance learning, but that's all kind of fluid as well, depending on what their command team decides. I would be surprised if they brought any other grades before that, because of the way the MDE has basically given guidelines out as to how do you bring students back on campus, and it's specifically for elementary students.
Okay.
And based on
then-
the executive order, I think that that plan is going to trickle down if they're for other schools. I think it seems like it's going to be a waived approach no matter what. Their examples are elementary, but I feel like they would stick to that waived example.
Right.
But no word yet. Okay. Any other questions about 833 or survey results? We have none, obviously. So that's January that we'll get those, right? And then any administrative recommendations that you have, any there?
No, I guess no changes. No changes to what you've already approved.
Okay. Well,
On
before
that,
we move on to
John,
13 is, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can you? So I was just curious. I mean, at one time I was going through the old notes and we had said, you know, up till I think spring break, right? April, something like that. I guess not to put you on a spot, but what are your thoughts? Are we, let's say the numbers come in good and we're able to proceed forward. Are we ready for May that we would start bringing kids back on if everything goes well?
Well, I think the focus right now is before that is to go to try to get students in April. Is, you know, we have a couple of hurdles which we identified last meeting to overcome, and a lot of it is staffing. But we're looking at different ways to overcome that. And if we can overcome that piece, I don't see any other major roadblocks. You know, there's basically two things we have to overcome: the staffing, and then the internet, you know, the access internet broadband issue. But we have a solution for that. It's just a matter of, you know, we probably won't get the fiber optic cable in here in time, just because of funding reasons, but we can increase the broadband by increasing our plan, but we're locked into it for a year. I mean, if I remember, it's like $300 a month additional, which we can do that financially. So we can get that hurdle overcome. It's the staffing issue really that will be, you know, the determining factor is, can we get students here in April or not? And if we can't for some reason, then I would want to try again in May. I'd want to do it at a month-to-month basis rather than, you know, let's just close it, you know, in beginning of April. If we can't, well, we're just going to stop. I really want students on campus before the school year gets out. Whatever that looks like, you know, hybrid or 100% in person, I want students on campus. It is extremely quiet on campus, and it's eerie. I mean, to be on this campus day after day, and it's so quiet. It's worse than summer, to be honest with you, because in summer we have people coming and going, and I really want to have students here in April. You know, and if we can't, then for sure in May. I mean, that's the focus, is to get students back on campus.
So I think the, you know, big picture, what the parents are going to want to hear, students as well, is not this month, right? We're working our best to get April in place, and we're going to keep checking every month. Is that fair? I mean, if April doesn't work, we're going to try May. We're not writing off 2021 yet.
No.
2020, 21. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
No,
I'm just trying to think, how are people going to accept, you know, the outcome from today's discussion? They're going to want to hear, are we back? Are we not? If not, when? Right? And how? So I think you answered it well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad that was a good question, Dan. But thank you, because I think that's important. All right. So any other discussion on 12G before we head out to 13? Head out. That's South California. As we head out.
Mine isn't like a specific one, but we'll just say, like, as a commentary, one of the other factors is that they did update their requirements for airflow and filtration. So that's not that we can't overcome it. That's obviously the most manageable, but it is a change.
John, you're aware of those changes, and are you addressing those?
Yeah, we did. We do have, let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9. We did get 9 air purifiers on campus. Our filtration system is at the best level that we can have it without risking the system failing. But I mean, we're at a MERV 9 filter. The recommendation is a MERV 13. However, because of the way our air handling system has been designed, a MERV 13 would cause the HVAC system to fail during the winter months. So we can't go to a MERV 13. So what as far as air filtration goes, we've got it maximized with the limitations of what we have to work with.
And then are the windows fixed?
And I was just going to say, there are some windows that are not able to be opened yet, and we're still working at that. The hardest part of that is getting a contractor in to be able to replace those. If I had 50 windows at $2,000 a piece, I'd probably have a better chance of getting a contractor in to work at it rather than where we're at. That's the sad state is finding a contractor that's willing to come in, because it's small potatoes instead of a big issue, and especially with the construction that's going on. Very few people want to come in and do renovate. They want to come in and do new, and that's just the economy of where we're at. Unfortunately, we're on the wrong side of the supply chain. We're on the demand, and there's not much supply out there.
John, I had a follow-up question on the filtration. So I understand we're at the best that we currently are set up for, but I guess the question is, do we have what we need? Because if we need a better filtration system, then we need a better filtration, not what's the best that we can do in the building, right? And so I ask because I've had this week 2 or 3 different people soliciting filtration work for us, which I'm telling them to follow up with the administration. So I don't know if they're also reaching out to you, but basically my question is, do we need to put an investment in our HVAC system such that we can do the MERV 13 or whatever it is we need to make sure everyone's safe?
Well, it would be nice to be able to put that investment in there, but we're against a time issue. The only way to do that would be in the summer, and then we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars because we have to replace the system.
So is a MERV 9, I don't even know this unit. This is a new unit for me. Is a MERV 9 safe? If we can't go 13, are you saying you're going to bring us back and a MERV 9's sufficient and without windows possibly opening? So that's, I guess, my question. If you're to bring us in there, is it safe? Do we pass snuff as far as requirements in that situation?
When I had training to look at the filtration system, their quality, at that time, they said it was safe, it was compatible and met the requirements. I guess I'd have to go back, and with the new requirements, I'd have to go back and look at what their air requirements or the results were and do a comparison to make sure that we're still within those guidelines. I haven't done that.
Yeah, that's kind of important to know.
Right.
If we're going to say.
And obviously I know it's super, super hard to get a lot of the contracty work done. Just again, you have fewer people and more jobs and bigger jobs. But it's also, I don't know, is it possible with our MSA Facebook page or some of our other contacts, we could try to put it out to the community, you know, just to see if there's somebody who's willing to maybe take a smaller, less time needed job, help out a school, you know, we can, there's sometimes for a school, people will just be willing to just do that little bit that might seem like it wouldn't work, but then it does because they're nice and we're a school and they're willing to help us. Might be able to use some of our community contacts and see if that's possible.
I got someone I can follow up with.
Oh, Cody. Yeah.
Good old
I don't
Cody.
know any contractors. I know some chemists, but I don't know any contractors. I'm sorry.
But that would be good. Could we just make sure to address, could we address that at next board meeting? That was kind of important.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right. All right, let's take a look at 13. Any other comments there out there? Okay. 13, future BOD meetings and workshop agendas. So just to let you know, strategic plan 111, 90 minutes, begins at 6. It'll be great. Finance training, I don't know if you wanted to mention anything about that, Cody?
I'll be working on that over the break. We were doing that. Were we going to do that as a workshop in February? Or was it going to be a separate day in February? Did we decide?
Are you talking? I think workshop would be great just because we have strategic plan and a board meeting in February.
Okay.
So yeah, this is one of our board goals. If we, that's a perfect place to put workshops.
So we've got probably a 40-minute presentation and 20 minutes for questions.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then we can always discuss things ahead of time like we've been doing.
Yep, I'm going to work on that over the break.
Fabulous. All right, cool. Expansion end of year goal. I don't know if you wanted to mention anything on that, Dan. Or, I mean, we're working on these all the time. So, I mean, again, committee purpose statements, we'll fill those in as we go. I don't know if you wanted to add anything. Contract language, contracted time versus at will. I know, John, you were maybe going to look into a little more of that at a workshop. So we didn't spend a whole lot of time on contracts, which was a little depressing, but I just came off of board training. So Eugene's 40 minutes of that whole thing was things I just got, went through, and it had nothing to do with contracts. So we need to kind of know this, how we're going to present contracts next year. So I think we talked maybe January, possibly looking into both the at-will versus a contracted time and at workshop. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we need, and the board really needs to make a decision on what type of contract they want to offer. Is it going to be an at-will contract, or is it going to be a contracted time?
Yeah, it'd be good to look at 2 scenarios there.
Yep.
So that's what we were thinking for January, everybody, just kind of look at that at workshop. Dates and times, we got a lot of them in January. I cannot appreciate you all enough. But we've got strategic plan at 6 on January 11th. We've got our workshop and meeting January 19th, starting at 5 and 6:15 respectively. And then we have our closed meeting on January 25th at 5 p.m. to go over all the mid-year climate survey results. So those will all get presented, and we'll have a closed meeting for that. So with that, is there any other questions before I adjourn our meeting? All right, y'all did great. We all did great. I'm really proud of us. I'm every proud of us every darn time. So I would like to motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
I can second. This is Dan.
Okay. And I will go ahead and close the meeting at 8:34. And I will do a roll call for that. And then we'll be about our business on winter break. Dan Ellingston.
Yes.
Cody Schneid.
Yes.
Michelle Krakowski.
Yes.
Gina Albers.
Yes.
Adam Bard.
Yes.
Robert Kruger.
Yeah.
Jennifer Bartle.
Yes.
Maggie Burgraff.
Yes.
Annie Cardenas. Yes. Adjourned at 8:34. Have a wonderful winter break, everybody. Rest up.